What's up, everybody? Welcome to You Rankin with me. Today we're talking Quentin Tarantino, but first, I am your host, Chad Webb, and over here, we have my co-host James Tancock, and as always, my wife Kerri Webb. How's it going, guys?
It's fine, man. Going real well. Glad to be back.
Absolutely. It has been a little bit of a while. We did a big Disney animation ranking. It took 5.5 hours. It was really crazy, but really fun. I think we made a lot of really great choices there. And yeah, that's really fun. Go check that video out if you haven't seen it. But it was 5.5 hours, so we're very, very tired. But we decided, hey, let's get back in the saddle. Let's talk one of, I think, the greatest filmmakers ever, Quentin Tarantino. This guy is interesting. He's like a nerd, kind of like a video store nerd, gone filmmaker, who is very, very smart about movies. Knows like so much. If you talk to him, he's just spewing information all the time. I think it also kind of makes him a little bit of a douchebag kind of guy, a little bit sometimes. I kind of hate hearing him talk, but he knows how to make a goddamn great movie. So let's start talking about it. But it's not just us. We have more guests. Let's bring them on. Let's talk to, I think, a pretty big Quentin Tarantino fan. Let's bring on Austin first.
Yeah, no, I'm a big Tarantino fan. I didn't get a chance to do a wardrobe change. I do have some Tarantino shirts, but I just got off a Battleground match, so I was sporting my strength for that match, if you could tell. So I didn't get a chance to do a wardrobe change, but I'm happy to be here. Tarantino is definitely one of my favorite 3 or 4 directors working today, and especially even all time. Like if I was doing all time, he's definitely top 5 for me. I love Tarantino, and I don't anticipate us having like a mini Battleground match like me and Henry did the last time we were on for our Halloween ranking, where we had a mini 20-minute argument about Halloween Ends in the middle of it that kind of extended that episode. I don't anticipate that tonight because I think we all agree, like even my number 9, which I won't spoil obviously, but like even my number 9, I'm positive on. Like I don't dislike any of these movies. Like I'm positive on each one. It's just ones I connect to more, in the higher spots. But yeah, I think these are all good movies. So I don't think we're going to have that argument where like as Halloween one, I had the ones I actively dislike. So, this will definitely be a different dynamic. And I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah. I couldn't have said that better myself. Even my number 9, I really like. So that's the thing, is these are all just really great movies that we're going to talk about, and some we like more than others. It's fine. And glad to have you here because I know you're a huge Tarantino stan. So let's bring in a familiar face, Dylan. What's up, buddy? Dylan Randazzo. How's it going?
It's going well. As you can tell by my voice, I am on low sleep right now. I just came off of a 24-hour live stream. It was awesome.
Go ahead and plug it.
Yeah, check out the Dill Pickle Movie Network. We did a 24-hour subathon, got some subscriptions, got some great donations, and recorded every single show that I do on my channel, which was fun. But I couldn't pass up this opportunity to talk about who I consider tied with Spielberg as my favorite director. I know it's a basic choice, but wow. I mean, those are the films I became a film fan on, were Spielberg's and Tarantino's. So I'm excited to talk about these, even if my thoughts are a little briefer than usual because of my condition. But I'm very excited to talk about
I'm similar to Dylan. I'm looking forward to when we rank all 30 or whatever Spielberg movies, because I've seen all of them. Or 40 or something, like 42 or whatever it is. Yeah, I've seen all of them, so I could definitely do a ranking, but that would be a really, really long show. Hey, I got to putt that one. I've got it, at number 25 instead of number 40. So, yeah.
We could maybe do like the same thing we did with Disney. Or
eras. Eras.
We could do eras, or we could do just like a 2-parter. Yeah, we could workshop that. That would be really fun.
Yeah, Spielberg's one you could break up into like 70s Spielberg, 80s Spielberg, 90s Spielberg, and like rank them kind of by decade. I think you could easily do that if you were to tackle that. That would be much easier. Yeah.
Great idea. Thank you for the suggestion and the ideas. That's perfect. We should take a look into that. But yeah, thank you so much, Dylan, for being here, because I know that you're tired as all hell, coming off of 24 hours. Trying to raise some subscriptions for your channel, and you did a really great job. It was fun working with you on that, and it was really incredible. I can't wait to see that channel grow more. It's not a basic choice if it's a goddamn great filmmaker. So I don't know. Let's bring in some other guys without further ado. JPO, what's up, man?
Hey, everybody.
All right. It was. We had
Sure, sweet.
JPO here for our Halloween episode, just like Austin was. So
Yeah, I was just there watching Henry and Austin fight and slightly agreeing with Austin, I believe.
Yeah, you're a little bit on my side, but yeah, you were like in the middle because you didn't hate it as much as I did, but you were kind of stuck in the middle.
And I was like, I can feel the hatred more than the love.
Right,
yeah.
yeah. I can feel your anger. Yeah.
all right, well, let's bring on the last guy, but certainly not least, my great buddy Charles.
Well, that's so nice. That's so nice that you said that I'm not the least. It is a position that I've been striving for since the beginning of time.
You
For
know,
me-
you're one of my favorite people, so you know.
Yeah, Quentin Tarantino for me is I think he's kind of an asshole. But I think he's incredibly talented, and I think it's a more nuanced portrait to think of him as the asshole that basically made it possible for movies, I think, to be cool. I think if you remove Quentin Tarantino from the history of filmmaking, movies take probably another 20 or 30 years to actually become cool again. And so I have a lot of just respect for Tarantino, and I love his movies. And so I'm excited to talk about them because I just did a recent rewatch, and this is the first time I've rewatched all the movies all in one go in like a shorter period of time. So
That's amazing.
I'm ready.
Yeah, I mean, I like I said, I second the asshole comment, but you know what? You're totally right. Sometimes it takes a great asshole to make, a lot
Most
of
geniuses are assholes, Chad. Most
Look.
geniuses are.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Look, one of the best filmmakers I think of this year and all time, James Cameron, is kind of rubs people the wrong way sometimes.
One of my
So-
favorite directors of all time, Stanley Kubrick, is a notorious asshole
Yes.
on set. So yes.
So-
He might be a criminal. He might have been a criminal as well, but yeah.
Yeah, maybe. All right, so let's get into starting this ranking. How it works is basically we're going to go, it's just like a normal ranking. We're going to go from our number 9. So how it works is we have took Kill Bill and we said, you know what, let's make that one film. Some people might separate it. It could be separated, but I was like, it's just going to be easier.
So basically, the whole bloody affair.
Yeah, exactly. So we're gonna rank it that way. Everybody was cool with that. So we just have 9. So we're gonna start probably just with me, and then just go down. We'll start with someone else. Every little number, and we'll start with our 9. We'll go to our 1. Pretty simple ranking. The only thing is, since there's 9, when we get to the someone's top 5, like if I say a movie that's in someone's top 5 at my 9, you could just go say, wait for it, hold off on that one. Hey, that's in my top 5, whatever. You don't have to remember any specific words. Just make it clear that we should talk about that one a little bit later, because you like it a little bit more.
I'd say that's true if that's like if we're
Only if it's in top 5, right? Only if it's
top 5. Yeah,
top 5, and if someone says it at number 6 through 9.
6 through 9. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, correct. Gotcha.
We'll get to it. We'll talk about them all. And is there anything else I'm forgetting here? I don't think so. Yeah, it's been a while, but if we forgot something along the way, then we'll bring it up. Let's just get started. I actually don't have my thing. No, I have my thing pulled up. All right, I'm going to start with my number 9. We'll kind of go around until we find.
You've got different covers. I'm like.
Yeah, because
so
I have
different.
the patron tier for Letterbox. So I can.
Letterbox nerd.
Where's ER, man? I'm looking for ER, the cover to ER, and it's nowhere here. I'm a little concerned.
No
Chad.
TV. No TV.
I'm looking for my best friend's birthday, and it's nowhere on your list.
We
What's
will
going
be
on?
doing television come phase 4, but not right now. All right, so my number 9 is The Hateful Eight.
Oh, big time top 5 punt for me. Everybody
right.
knows me. Anybody knows me knows that. So yeah,
All right,
that's a
great.
big punt for me.
Kerri, what is your number 9?
My number 9 is also The Hateful Eight.
All right,
Big
James?
time punt again.
I put Death Proof at number 9.
Death Proof. Okay, no one else at James. Austin, what's your number 9?
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yeah,
Top
fine.
5.
That's
All
a punch. Yeah. Charles, 9.
My number 9 is Reservoir Dogs.
Punt.
Yeah, wait for that one.
All right, JPO. 9.
Death Proof as well. Death Proof.
All right, and Dill 9.
My 9 is Jackie Brown.
Punt.
Punt.
Definite punt. Yeah.
Punt.
That's a big
Yeah,
one
wait
for
for it.
me. I
think-
might have missed one as well earlier, but Jackie Brown, I'm remembering.
I think we're talking Death Proof now.
Yes,
we've gone
that
through
is,
nines.
and honestly, I do have a feeling because all of these movies are like so good, and a lot of this is going to come down to personal preference. That maybe this might be our only one that's not in someone's
Yeah.
top 5.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Probably. Yeah.
No.
So, who said Death Proof first?
I did.
James. All right, James, you go ahead and start with Death Proof.
So it just, I feel like compared to all the other movies he's done, it just felt like kind of like a different, like maybe caliber of storytelling, and it didn't just it didn't do it for me as much as his other movies did. I mean, it's a stuntman who just likes getting like women in his car, killing them. I'm not sure like how much else. I don't really know like what the motive kind of was for stuntman Mike, like just why I want to do that aside from just having a bit of fun, I guess. And I really enjoyed like the death scenes, like that's very Tarantino-esque. Of course, the car, the other one in half, and bodies go flying. Like I'm grateful for that part. That was awesome to see. But like kind of like the end where they kind of turn on him, so it's kind of a little revenge story. Like he's a bit more of like wimp than like he kind of first is known to be, based on like everyone, like the girls trying to get back at him. But I feel like his other stuff just didn't quite do it as much.
Yeah, makes sense. I'm not really sure there was a motive. Maybe somebody caught it. Let's go to Austin. What do you think about Death Proof?
So Death Proof is not far off for me. It's number 8, so it's still in that bottom tier. But again, I rewatched it recently because that was the one I was least familiar with coming into it. Oddly enough, I just watched it for a different show. But it played better for me on the second one, which is why I at least jumped one spot. It used to be number 9, so it jumped at least once because I was a little more into kind of the dialogue and the dynamic of the girls. I just think for me, I don't connect to it as much as a guy. It being just like a bunch of girls sitting around talking shop at a bar. It's just something that I don't personally connect to, and it's just not as interesting. So for me, the first hour is kind of aimless. Other than when they finally get, when the primary protagonist, Zoe Bell and Rosario Dawson and Mary Liz Winstead, like finally kind of hit the road and get to like the part where they're taking the car for a spin, the movie literally amps up for me and does a lot more in that last 30 minutes. I mean, all that stunt stuff is spectacular. That whole final 30 minutes is great, and I think it's absolute dynamite. And I do love Kurt Russell. I just wish there was more of him in the first half, because you really just kind of get that one scene where he kills the girl and him just sitting at the bar a little bit. I wish he was just kind of, like James said, we learned a little bit more about him, maybe a little bit of backstory, maybe a little bit of his history being a stunt driver, I think would have been interesting. Something to kind of tie it all together, maybe an encounter he had with these girls at some point to piss him off, something. I need that extra thread to really get me invested. I just feel uninvested for the first hour until we kind of finally get to that showdown. But that showdown stuff is great. So it's number 8 for me.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting to, like, you both brought up the whole motivation thing as kind of like a little bit of a detractor, not a huge one, but like kind of like, oh, maybe if we will. But I'm sitting here also thinking like, well, maybe that's what's creepy about him. Maybe he's like Michael Myers in that way. That's what's kind of creepy about him, is we don't know what the hell makes him tick. But I don't know. Maybe that's dumb. Maybe that's brilliant. Who knows? It's film. Charles, what do you think about Death Proof?
Yeah, Death Proof is my number 8 movie, and so I didn't consider it his worst, but I also completely understand why a lot of people have it at the bottom. I think when the first time I watched it was actually recently for this, because I just always put it off. I just always really enjoyed Planet Terror. And I remember watching like the first 20 minutes of Death Proof and just being bored out of my mind when I was in college. So then I just didn't watch the rest of it. But I finally went back to it, and I'm actually glad I went back to it. It's not a perfect movie, but it has a lot of flaws. If I had to sum it up, I'd say it's like 70 minutes of pretty great conversations, 10 minutes of various lap dances, and 20 minutes of violence. And that's overall like sounds like a pretty fun movie and a pretty like stylish Tarantino movie. But for the majority of the movie, there are moments where it's hard not to be bored. because the stakes are just very low for the most of the movie. But I thought what I did was really interesting, which is why I don't feel comfortable putting it at the bottom, is that I do think it creates like a really interesting duality in its story, by kind of dividing it almost in half between the two different groups of women, because it does a beautiful job of reversing the damsel trope. Like the beginning or the first half is very much the women are being treated like they are in a traditional Slayer flick where they have no power to do really anything that they want to get out of the situation. There are ultimate like obstacles placed in their path that make it harder for them to steer away from their, victimhood. But then in the second half, it's completely out of that. Like the women have complete control over everything. And I feel like it's Tarantino's way of showing that in feminism, because of feminism, or not because of feminism, but it's his way of kind of creating like a feminist film, because he's trying to show that like the only way to survive a man like Kurt Russell's character is you have to be expert stunt women who can live through 10 minutes of pure terror on top of a car. And then if you can live through all of that, you can survive as a woman in America, and you get to punch Kurt Russell like 20 times. And so I feel like it's a great way to like get a message out about how difficult it is just to exist as a woman in America, but make it in a way that everybody's just having fun, and everybody gets to have their cake and eat it too. And so for that reason, I didn't feel comfortable putting it at the bottom, but I completely understand if someone watches it and it's just like, it was really boring and I didn't have fun.
Great. JPO, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I do have this in my bottom as well here. And just to touch kind of briefly what we said even at the beginning, I like Death Proof, so it kind of shows you, that there's not going to be a bad movie on the list as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, this is just the one that, and I almost feel bad even saying it's my least favorite, because I do feel like, it was an experimentation film. It was a grindhouse, along with Planet Terror. I do like this better than Planet Terror because this has better dialogue in it. Where Planet Terror is just mostly, kind of the grindhouse type film. But yeah, it's the one that I'm the least fulfilled in. You know what I mean? Like, some good dialogue. It's pretty decent. Really good. Kind of like you said, 10, 15 minutes when it really ramps up at the end. And then that's it. And, like I said, I wish they had continued the experimentation. But yeah, they compared to everything else. Just the scope of it, the characters. It's just the one that grabs me the least. It's the one I find myself kind of going back to the least here. So I like it, but yeah, don't love it.
Yeah, perfect. Dylan.
Yeah, this was my number 7, so I had a little higher, but it's still in my bottom 4 or whatever. But again, like, I love all these movies. He's one of my favorite directors. So I think Charles hit on a lot of the great things I love about like the feminism in the piece and what it has to say. But I also appreciate it so much for like the craft and like. You mentioned how like Tarantino was like such a nerd, and like I think this is him kind of having the most fun, because he's just having fun. Like there isn't more, like he doesn't really have to like hone in on every single piece of the craft like he does for so many of these other more prestige pictures. He could just have like a grand old time kind of staging this trashy car race type, and action sequence, this kind of low budget. It's such a different wheelhouse than all these other films. And I think that's so admiring to see someone who has the ability to make like a really prestige picture or these grand Westerns or whatever, but still can like have fun and go back to like the roots of like his upbringings and the movies he grew up watching and being inspired by. So that's why I really like it. And Kurt Russell's a great villain. I love that car chase, and the car itself feels like a character, almost like the Spielberg Duel film. It feels like the cars are these characters personified, and it's I love it. It's so much fun.
Yeah, great. All right, so it's up to me. I got to talk about this, and I'm sure Kerri will touch on this too. This is one of like our first dates that we went on, was
not
to
our
see.
first, but
I said one of to
yeah.
see the Grindhouse films.
Nice.
And
so you're the other one besides me who went to the theater to watch it.
Yeah,
we did.
Because boy, when I saw it, there were about 10 people in the audience for that Grindhouse.
It was pretty updated.
Yes, yeah, it was a fun time, man. People should have gone to that. It was great. I think though, if it was me, I would have had Death Proof go first, because I think Planet Terror is just a dynamite finale, a little more over the top, a little faster pace, would have made for a more literally explosive finale had they put Planet Terror second. I just think if I was making that double feature, I would put Death Proof first, and just because Tarantino again is more on dialogue, and the Robert Rodriguez one is literally like a slam bang zombie, crazy apocalyptic kind of movie, I would have had that second just for me in the order. You know what I mean? But yeah,
that makes sense. I don't actually remember too much about Planet Terror, to be honest, but also I think the ending of Death Proof really makes the movie. So I think to end on that is also kind of cool too. So either way, I think it's an interesting choice. The overall thing, the grindhouse that this came with was pretty cool. Like some of the commercials that they did were weird, but like Edgar Wright did one, which I think is pretty sweet. I need to rewatch that at some point. So people talking about this movie Death Proof for a very long time, just as like, oh, it's Quentin Tarantino's worst movie. Nobody really likes it. I know Dylan was always a big defender. When I talked to him, he was always like, I actually really like that one. And for me, I really didn't have much of an opinion because I remember seeing it so long ago that I was like, do I like that one? I'm not even sure, to be honest. Rewatching it again, I was like, okay, this is actually kind of a banger. I'm not going to sit there and say this is a great, great, great film, like one of the masterpieces of cinema, anything like that. But yeah, it's Quentin Tarantino having a fun time, making a grindhouse, low budget kind of, horror movie in a way, really, which I think really works for this. I do agree. It gets really slow. There's a lot of dialogue. It's kind of a Quentin Tarantino thing, somewhat, but I agree with the first half. There's a lot of buildup, but I think where it leads is pretty incredible because it's Kurt trying to get like one of these girls in the car with him. He finally does, and then he's like, "Oh, this car's death proof," and it's like, "Well, at least for me," or something like that. And then he kills her by like speeding up, stopping, and then she slams into the stuff. And
brutal
scene. It's really kind of incredible and scary and great. And then right there, you're afraid of this guy. And then it goes into the other thing where you see another group of girls, and you're like, "What? Sorry, women. Sorry,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Did you even watch Death Proof, Chad?
I take the themes. I am a cis white male, and I'm terrible, and I'm so sorry.
Sometimes I can't help myself. I'm sorry.
Thank you for correcting me. I shouldn't have called them girls. That's true. Anyways, you go on to another group of women, and you're afraid for them almost immediately because he's kind of creeping up on them a little bit, and kind of like, didn't he like touch her feet or something, just sticking out the window, and you're like, oh my god, because she's like sleeping with a mask, and you're like, this dude is so creepy. And then it's total role reversal at the end when they start chasing him, beating the shit out of him. I don't know. I forgot that happened, and then I just was like, this is actually pretty damn incredible. I don't know. I really, really enjoyed it. I do agree it's pretty slow. I think it maybe could have gone a little bit quicker pace, but I think he wanted to build it up a lot, instead of just diving into all the stuff. So I think there's a lot of masterful work there as well. So I thought this one was pretty incredible. I had this at number 7, just like Dylan. So, yeah, Kerri.
Cool. I had this the highest rank then, at number 6, just out of my top 5. Mostly because I think the ending just for me pays off so well. And for me, it's worth all of the build up in the first half of the movie. And I don't know. I just really love the dialogue in this, actually, especially of Quentin Tarantino's more dialogue heavy movies. This is just the one I prefer. I don't know. And the car chase scene is incredible. Like Kurt Russell playing, I think mostly against type at this point in his career. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is really fantastic.
What's your name? Stuntman Mike.
And I love, I'm blanking on her name now. Zoe Bell. Zoe Bell in this movie. I just like absolutely adore her.
A lot of people from Rent, which we were like, that's a very special movie for us that we watch all the time as like high school kids. And so I'm like, oh my God, there's so many people from Rent. This is amazing.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think in my trend towards a lot of Quentin Tarantino movies is how well the endings pay off for me. And I think this is, for me, it's just one of the best ones.
I think that's one of Quentin Tarantino's staples is a fantastic ending, and I don't think this is any different. So
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the ending because that moment, there's a psychological impact of just seeing Kurt Russell's character like whimpering and crying
Yeah.
as he's driving. It's just like incredible to watch that like whole. And you got to get through all of the really difficult, violent scenes to get there because
and it's not as impactful if not. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
All right. So Kerri, do you want to start with your 8?
Sure. My 8 is Reservoir Dogs.
All right. Someone punted already for that.
Yes.
James, what is your 8?
Put Hateful Eight.
All right. And that's already still, yep. Austin, 8.
My 8 was Death Proof, so we already talked
That's
about
right.
that.
All right. Charles, 8.
My 8 was Death Proof as well.
All right. JPO, 8.
Jackie Brown.
All right. That's another wait for it. Dylan.
Same.
Wait for it.
My 8 was Reservoir Dogs.
All right. So we're going on to 7 now. James, what is your 7?
But Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Oh, wait. No, I didn't say my 8. My 8.
what's
I'm
your
sorry. My 8 is also Reservoir Dogs.
Okay.
7, James. I'm sorry. What'd you say?
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
And that's a wait for it. Austin.
I have a feeling this will get punted. It's Inglourious Bastards.
Wait for
Yeah,
it.
that's a wait for it for me.
That is a wait for it. Yeah. Austin, I actually didn't expect that from you. Interesting. All right.
I sadly did, knowing.
Oh,
Okay.
JPO knows my ranking, so it's not going to be a surprise to him.
Gotcha. Well, I also have heard you like talk a lot about how much you like that movie. So it's incredible that you like a lot of movies that much more. Charles, 7.
Yeah.
My 7 is The Hateful Eight.
Okay. JPO.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Interesting. Dylan.
7 is Death Proof.
All right. So we're about to have some conversation soon, but not yet, right?
Not yet, and you have to say, we both have to say our 7s.
Oh, Death Proof.
Okay. And my 7 is it hasn't been said yet, so I'm gonna assume it's probably in someone's top 5. It's Kill Bill.
That's in my top
Yeah,
5.
it's in my top 5. Yeah.
Okay. 6s. We'll start with Austin.
Reservoir Dogs.
All right. Charles, 6. I mean, yeah, Charles.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Wait, was I supposed to go Dylan? I don't care.
No, Austin was right. Austin.
Yeah,
first.
yeah. No, I was next. Yeah.
Austin, Charles, JPO, Dylan, me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, JPO.
You've done this a couple times already, Chad. How'd you forget? What was 6? Hateful Eight.
Dylan.
That's my 6 as well, Hateful Eight.
I think
Bunch of haters on this goddamn panel. What the hell's wrong with
Austin has
y'all?
that higher, so I think we're going to talk about that soon.
Yeah.
Me for 6 is also Kill Bill, and then
Okay.
Kerri 6.
My 6 was Death Proof,
Okay.
and then James is 6.
Okay.
What's your 6?
I'm sorry.
Kill Bill 6.
What?
I'm
What,
sorry.
James?
Kill Bill.
Kill Bill.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So, if your notes are like, is there anything we could talk about yet?
There's only 2
No.
films we all have in the top 5, if that helps.
Okay. There's nothing we could talk about right now.
No.
All right. Let's go on to 5.
Yeah, this is how it's gonna be. We maybe.
This is
I
interesting.
don't know if wait for it was the right picture.
I don't know, but anyways, we'll talk about them soon. Charles, 5.
My 5 is Pulp Fiction.
Okay. We're in 5s now, so let's just get around to them, and we'll talk about the one that's been brought up the most.
Yeah.
JPO 5.
Reservoir Dogs.
Dylan 5.
Kill Bill.
My 5 is Inglourious Bastards. Kerri.
My 5 is Inglourious Bastards as well.
James.
5 is Jackie Brown.
All right. Awesome.
Kill Bill, The Whole Bloody Affair.
All right. So, Kerri, help me out. What do you think has come up the most?
I'm gonna say Hateful Eight. I think is the only one.
Right.
It's just in one person's
Let's-
top 5.
Let's do this where we go around, and we'll have Austin round it out with his positives, because I know he loves that one. I'll just go ahead and start real quick. I have this ranked lowest. I don't have too much to say about it. I've seen it twice. I think it's very long. There's just a lot of drawn out talking. Like if we think like Death Proof is slow, I think this one is even slower because it's longer. There's a lot of like really good characters in this. I really like. Oh my God, what is her name? Like
Jennifer Jason Leigh.
Jennifer Jason Leigh.
Jason Leigh. I love her in this movie. I love the special cameo we get from Channing Tatum towards the end. There's a lot of really cool stuff. Oh, I also always love Walton Goggins. So there's a lot of great actors in this. It's incredible to see them do the dialogue and just do all the stuff. Bruce Dern.
Did you keep talking?
All right, sorry. Kerri is going to go do some cat
Cat duties.
Cat wrangling.
Cat breakup. Yeah, and just the stuff about like the racism and the Confederacy and the comeuppance with Bruce Dern and Sam Jackson's pretty great and funny. I don't know. There's not too much that I'm gonna say about this. I'll let other people like talk it up or talk it down. Like I said, all of these movies are great in their own way. This is just the one that I probably connect with the least. I think it's just so long. I don't really like watching the whole of it. I think I like watching parts of it more than the whole. So that's pretty much all I'll say right now. Kerri, what are your thoughts on this one? Hateful Eight.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I really like this movie, and this was my lowest rank, so there's really not a bad movie on this list, like we've been saying. Western is probably my least watched genre.
Same here.
So it is just a little bit harder for me to connect with a Western movie. This is one that is dialogue heavy, so I guess it is. It's also I don't know, of Quentin Tarantino's dialogue heavy movies, it's just maybe not my favorite. But overall, it's a fantastic movie. Like I don't know.
I mean, there's some movies like Pulp Fiction we'll get to that has a lot of drawn out dialogue.
Yeah, it's not a bad thing.
I just think some other films do it a little bit better.
I would say for this one, and this one, I've only seen this once, and we watched it for this ranking, and it was just a little, I don't know, some of it, sometimes the first time you watch a Quentin Tarantino movie and there's some like unexpected violence or unexpected parts, like the whole, I think the scene with Samuel L. Jackson where he's walking that guy's son out in the snow is like, that to me, I'm like kind of shocked and like horrified and like, I think on a first time watch
may or may not have actually happened. I'll talk about that.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. Yeah, but overall, I really don't have anything bad to say about this movie. Like, it's a fantastic movie. It's just, I think Westerns just aren't really my preferred genre.
Very good. James, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, I think I agree with you guys, which is why I was a little bit lower. It's pretty dialogue heavy, and I feel that my ranking now, I feel like that's kind of like divide, and the majority of these movies is like the kind of dialogue heavier ones are a little bit toward the bottom. Again, I feel kind of bad putting down number 8 with Ennio Morricone soundtrack, but I think there's other one that I connected with a little bit more, and there are other stories and Quentin Tarantino's I like more, so this one's just down at number 8. That's all.
Yeah, for sure. Charles, Hateful Eight.
Yeah, Hateful Eight. Yeah, a good movie. Like I think other people have said, it's hard for me to think of Tarantino having a bad movie or really making a bad movie. It's not a bad movie. I would say it was probably the most bored I have been watching a Tarantino movie, I think, ever. Not necessarily meaning that as a big insult, but just more so just I really didn't have a lot of stake in the stakes for the majority of the movie. But I think it's his most technically proficient. I think it's also maybe his most beautiful. Maybe Django's a little bit more beautiful, I think. But the sound, the violence, the costumes, the world building, the sets, just everything is just done with so much detail. And the dialogue does a great job of just painting a bigger picture than we get to see ourselves of what's going on in the characters' lives. But for me, it was one of the few movies where I walked away from the movie and I still am struggling to figure out like what he was trying to say with it. It's one of those movies similar to Reservoir Dogs 2 that I'll talk about later, where nothing really is resolved. Things just kind of end for everybody. But it doesn't really have really any greater impact, or there's no real learning that really occurs. It's just people trying to survive, and maybe that's what he was trying to say, but it's not something that was really entertaining for me. I think the thing that I really enjoyed about it, though, is I love dualities. I talked about it a little bit in Death Proof, but I love the opposites attract part of writing, and I found it really fascinating to see Samuel Jackson's character end up working closely with cannot remember his name.
Stern.
What's the name?
Bruce Stern.
No, not Bruce Stern.
Russell.
No, not Kurt
Goggins.
Russell. Goggins, yes.
Yeah.
By the end, I love Walter Goggins from Vice Principals and not Eastbound and Down, but another thing he does too. And it's great to see them kind of come together and work together at the end. But that was like the few things that I was kind of grabbing onto.
Yeah, I mean, there's actually some like really incredible like sequences in the film, like when they're all kind of trying to get one up on each other, and there's poisonings and stuff like that, and there's a lot of great stuff in it. JPO, 8
Yeah, again, I dig this film. It's in that 4-star category here for sure. Yeah, just kind of like to touch upon what other people said as far as the only kind of slight downfalls, if you want to say that, is you feel the length. I don't complain too much about the length usually when I usually talk about it, because when it's this good, I don't mind. That's what I always say about length is if you can hold me and if it's good, then I don't really see for me too much to complain about that here. One thing that maybe holds me back a little bit from loving it to that next level is like some of my higher ranked Tarantinos I really love, because there's a whole world going on here. Pulp Fiction, we're jumping around all over the place here. Kill Bill and Django are kind of almost road trip like movies here. This is obviously one set location here, so it's almost like a play, and it's great, but at the same time, it's just I kind of like that kind of bigger world building that I get in some of his other movies here. But again, man, it's really good. It's great looking. I too am a huge Walton Goggins fan here, so I was glad to see him kind of from beginning to end get to shine. I was almost afraid going into it he'd like die quickly, because I think I'm just used to him getting like those smaller parts sometimes where like he's just kind of there for a scene or two, and I'm like, I hope he lasts, and he does to the very end. And like the Channing Tatum thing was cool, but at the same time I felt like the ending of that was kind of quickly. Like he comes out of the fucking shed finally or whatever, and it dies very quickly. I'm like, oh, okay, that was the outcome of that. that was a big rewind build up to a quick finish, I felt, for him. So yeah, like I said, I still dig it. So still a good film.
Yeah, the best thing that I love about Walton Goggins is just how he talks. So yeah, he's fun to watch. Dylan,
he's great.
Yeah, this was right outside my top 5. This is my number 6. I think of all the films, I forget who hit on it. I think it might have been Charles. This is like his most beautiful in terms of how it's shot. I think it's his most atmospheric. I think he uses that snowy landscape so well. He sets the scene. Really, it's such a fun watch on like a cold winter's night to like sit down and kind of like cozy up with like the fireplace and like watch this movie. I watched this like I think on New Year's Day when it came out, or the week it came out, like in the theaters, it was freezing out, and my friends and I drove to the theater, and like it just fit the vibe so well for that time of year with the snow on the ground. Like I think it's one of those movies where if you're in the right mood for it like that, it can really be powerful. Just watching it any other day though on TV, like it doesn't have the same effect for me, but it's also like it still brings me back to when I first watched it in that atmospheric way. And I like the dialogue. I think it's good. I think the build up on rewatch, getting to the cabin takes a little too long, to where when we're in the cabin, from then on, I'm like fully locked in, like to the end. I'm fully entertained, but the buildup is a little long to get there. Even though it's great in establishing these characters, I still love it most when they get to the cabin. But it's a great film, great performances. Jennifer Jason Leigh's incredible. Kurt Russell, Walton Goggins, as we all said. Yeah, it's solid. It's right outside my top 5. Ennio Morricone's score is so freaking good too. So I just like listening to that music.
Yeah, perfect, Dylan. Okay, so you made a great case for it to be like just a great like winter movie, but could it be a Christmas movie?
It is a Christmas movie.
It is.
So
All right.
There's a brief dropped line where Joe Gage, Michael Madsen's character, says he when he's making up his reason for being there is saying he's going home to visit his mother for Christmas. So it is a Christmas movie.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, I was just about to transition. I wanted to say, Austin, please, for all of us, defend this masterpiece
Yes.
from us Inglorious Bastards.
Okay, so it's my number 2, and on any given day, I'll say it's my number 1. I bounce back and forth between this and another movie
I love
for
that.
my number 1. So how many times has everybody seen it? Because I want to blow your guys' mind for it. So how many
Twice.
times have we seen it? Twice?
3-4 times.
5. Single digits? Okay.
Maybe 4
Full
times.
confession, I've watched this movie over 50 times. I love it.
Holy shit.
Wow.
I put this
Goddamn.
this is one of my 2 or 3 background movies I just put on
Wow.
just to put on along with the Wolf of Wall Street and my number 1 that I'll talk about that I just put on because I just love being with these characters. To me, this thing is such a character piece that I just love hanging out with them. Like I from the very beginning, I'm fascinated with everybody's backstory. And I think Tarantino gives us these amazing backstories for these characters. And it's even better on a rewatch when you realize that most of the characters in this movie, their backstory that you get isn't even their backstory. They're just making all this shit up as they're going along and kind of almost improvising because you realize that they're actually not who they say they are. So the way they're interacting with all the characters is even more fascinating on a rewatch when you know that they're just bullshitting and trying to come up with stuff on the fly when they're being asked questions, when they're being probed, by whoever, by whether it's Kurt Russell or Sam Jackson or whoever, doing their thing. And I love a good one location movie, a thriller where there's a sense of isolation, where there's a sense that nobody can escape whatever fate that may come here. And I think one of the primary reasons I connect to it a lot is my 2 favorite horror movies of all time are The Thing and the 78 Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And what each of those have is a sense of paranoia. And I love the paranoia in this film. This film has paranoia from the get-go. From the very beginning, when they roll up on Sam Jackson's character, Kurt Russell is completely and utterly paranoid of anybody that comes into his path, thinking that they're going to take him out at any second. So Kurt Russell has a complete sense of paranoia. So does Sam Jackson, because he's picking up on all of the things that every time he interacts with a character, he's kind of on edge. He's probing them. He's kind of throwing out these little questions, with Senor Bob, questioning every little move that they make. And I think there's a build there with the paranoia that obviously comes to a complete and utter ultra violent spectacle, near the end of it as he kind of reveals his piecing of everything together. And like you said, I know Channing Tatum exits the movie rather quickly, but that's why right afterwards you get the actual backstory, which is really fascinating of how they got there and how everything, and it harkens back to the little things that Sam was like noticing, like the jelly bean on the ground and the little things of like all the little weird stuff that we saw, like how it actually got there. And you get to see a whole nother group of characters that you didn't even know we wanted to see with Minnie, with Sweet Dave, and all these people. And they're giving great performances as well, even late into the movie, even Zoe Bell from Death Proof. So I just think it's a nice build of this. I'm always on edge, even from the first time I ever saw it, just wanting to know what the real story is, because he knows something's up. We don't know exactly what's up. We don't know who it is. It's a better murder mystery, in my opinion, than Clue. I've never been a pick on Clue, but I like it way more than that movie. And I think that the extended length, I'm invested because it's shot so well, because the score is amazing. I think almost everybody here is giving an Oscar-level performance. Almost everybody here, I can make an argument for. I think it's one of Sam Jackson's best movies. I think it's one of Kurt Russell's best movies. I think it's one of Walton Goggins' best movies. Jennifer Jason Leigh is giving an amazing performance. And even like Tim Roth is so much fun as this fake Oswaldo Mowbray and all this thing he puts on, and then he reveals himself as English Pete, and it becomes like this weird Cockney accent. Like he even changes his accent. Like it just works so well in these rewatches when you know everybody's backstory, when you know everybody's how much they're improvising. And I just really dig that paranoid thriller kind of a thing with it, and the slow build. And then when it explodes, obviously Tarantino's known for that sort of third act violence, as we'll say in a bunch of his movies, and it gets that, and I dig it as well. So I love the murder mystery. I love the paranoia. I love the one location stuff, the fact that it plays out like a stage play. I know it's long for some people, but man, I could spend a whole nother hour with these characters, like just hanging out at this haberdashery. I just dig it so much, man. So I get why other people don't like it. Whatever it is, that aspect just clicks with me. And I've watched this movie so many goddamn times, just putting it on. I listen to it at work. Like I'll just put it on and listen to it because I just like listening to these characters talking and yapping and doing all this thing. And there's a lot of great moral debates throughout the whole thing, like you said, with the South stuff, with slavery, with the racial tension, with just how much he doesn't trust everybody, and yeah, like I said, that fact that it ends up with Walton Goggins and Sam Jackson, these two characters who are literally at each other's throats with a gunpoint in the carriage, that they're the two guys who have to work together and survive, and end up kind of becoming friends before they die, is really great. So I hope I've kind of illustrated why I like this movie so much, but I really dig it. So yeah,
Awesome.
I know I'm on an island, but it is
You
what
made
it is. I dig it.
you made a great argument about the power of rewatching and being able to
Yeah.
see the characters now as like actors basically in that
Yes,
moment.
they're all acting. When you realize the whole gang
Yeah.
is acting and coming
That's
up
a
with
good
their
point.
backstories on the fly, like when you rewatch it, like they cannot say anything wrong, because if they do, they're going to be, known from the beginning. So I mean, obviously Senor Barb was on the edge because he's the first one that interacts with him, but everybody else is playing a character, and it's really interesting. Like when you go back and watch it, I love that.
What a brilliant I want to say defense, but it's not like we hate the movie or anything.
Right? No, I understand.
Brilliant, like send up of this film that I kind of want to watch again now. Keep having all of your thoughts in my head. Watching this again, like, oh, you know what? Austin has a great point about this and this and this. Very, very well said. I love that. I love that you talk so highly about this film. Because I think it is great in a way, and I love how it does kind of unfold that way. Speaking of like paranoia, because you talked about all the paranoia films, have you seen Francis Ford Coppola's The Conversation?
Oh yeah, I just watched that for the first time a few months ago. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. If you want to learn more about that, well, maybe watch it first and then check out our picture this episode.
Yeah, I won't spoil it, but the final thing with what Gene Hackman does to his apartment is pretty amazing. Yeah, it's a great way to end that movie. If you like a good paranoia thriller. Yeah, I dig paranoia movies, man.
Yeah,
They're so much
absolutely.
fun. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. What do we
if we wanted to, Reservoir Dogs was only in 2 people's top 5, so we could talk about that.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. We're in the top 5s right now.
And I want to say it's probably, I'm trying to keep track of everyone who it's highest for. I think James maybe has it highest.
James,
you haven't thrown it out yet, right?
I have Reservoir Dogs at 4.
Okay, yeah, so you have it highest.
He has it highest. He did start one time. Who had the next highest?
JPO.
JPO, do you want to start with Reservoir Dogs, and we'll go to James?
Whatever's groovy.
Cool.
That's fine. Yeah.
So I know I've been trying to think about which one I saw first, and I actually do think it was Reservoir Dogs here. So it's always been one that I've always kind of been enamored by. I know it's been funny before, almost not to sound hypocritical, saying how A Hateful Eight sometimes is kind of one scope, one place. I've almost, maybe because it's a lot shorter, it's actually one of his only films that I think is right around that hour and a half mark. So again, it's kind of like a play. Everyone is so good in this here. This is the start of seeing his dialogue here, talking about the tipping, talking about Madonna, and then obviously it gets way more gruesome here. The soundtrack, just everything about this. I just think it still flows really well here. Masterclass of somebody who he might have done the student film or the first test film earlier, but a man who had a vision here, and even hearing his stories later on about how he had to fight for the the ear scene and whatnot, and but he stood by it because he knew what kind of movie he wanted to make, and that's the kind of, I think, one of the cool things about Tarantino is he knows the movie he's making here, and that is not necessarily for everyone, but I think for most people, for movie lovers, I think it can be here. Still holds up here. That's why I think it's right in my top 5. It is my number 5 here. Reservoir Dogs. Also, I really love the canister edition on DVD that I had. I think it'd make the move.
I have the new 4K from Best Buy. I can show it on camera in a minute if we get to me. Yeah, it's really cool.
Way to rub it in, Pads. I just said I lost my canister.
Yeah, we'll get to you later, Austin.
I'm going to go pull it real quick. I promise. Hang on.
Cool. James, what do you like about this movie?
Well, there's a lot that JPO's already touched on, but I feel like it was interesting to not really get to see the whole Diamond Heist bit. It's the aftermath of it. So
yes,
almost like Jaws, it works. You see less of the shark, less of the heist.
Right, and I feel like that kind of is kind of the payoff itself, just getting to see the whole, again, the whole, he's really good at these whole whodunits and who's the double crosser, they're trying to find out who's responsible or whatever. And that part kind of really appealed to me. And honestly, I liked kind of how she was and all of the factors that he put in for this. Obviously they're in so much of his future works too, but you get to see kind of where more or less got their start kind of, but I think I appreciate just how much put into such a kind of a short film, and it really just kind of works for me. It's like a plot.
Hell yeah. All right. I don't know. Kerri, what do you want? You want to talk about this one now?
Sure.
Okay.
I don't have much more to add. This is just a brilliant film. Like, just the way it's formatted is amazing. And Quentin Tarantino does do this a lot with his movies, but unless I'm wrong, this is like his first major release, right?
Yeah.
And like this, I think, was just so innovative at the time, especially. And yeah, I think like you guys touched on the fact that you don't see the heist itself is really, really cool. You just see like kind of the before and the aftermath. And yeah, the performances in this are incredible. It's really only lower down because there's movies I just personally like a little bit more, but it's an amazing film.
Yeah, I'll go real quick because I don't have too much to say. And I want to just piggyback off that where, I think the performances are really fantastic. I think it's really cool that this is like the first Quentin Tarantino film, like truly, because I think this one was his like starting platform, and it was already so great that it just kind of only started to get better. Not saying that one's the weakest necessarily, but like he started to really hone his craft after that. This one inspired other filmmakers too, like Edgar Wright and stuff. So I have to give, so much praise to something like this and, all the other films that Tarantino has made that inspired people like Edgar Wright and other like newer filmmakers to come after him that I love so much. But yeah, this one is incredible because you don't see the heist like people are saying. You see the aftermath, but I love some of the scenes like the Stuck in the Middle with You sequence is pretty incredible. Exactly. Thank you, JPO. I think I had never seen Tim Roth be as incredible as he is in this. I think he's kind of like the star of this movie.
I'm fucking dying, man.
I love Steve Buscemi in it. I love there's so many great people in it. And yeah, I think it is just like the starting film, so it's a little bit weaker for me. I think it's like a remake of something else. I'm sure somebody knows the info on that. I'm sure Austin does. Yeah, I like it when I watch it, but it's not one that I remember and you go, I fucking love Reservoir Dogs. But it does have some really great, like the dialogue scene at the very beginning, I think is pretty incredible. And Tarantino just knows how to craft these things. He's a good director, I'll say. Austin, what do you think?
Hot take on that. Tarantino's a good director, by the way.
Austin, you get the Blu-ray?
Oh, so yeah, those are just this was the Steelbook, the 4K that Best Buy puts out. It's just cool because the slipcover.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And then you pull it off, and the ear comes off. So I thought that was awesome.
You have to say that again when Kerri gets back. But yeah, do you want to talk about the film?
Sure, yeah, it's my number 6, so it's just outside my 5. And really, like in my rankings, I almost go for just the ones I've rewatched the most, like literally by numbers. So I've watched it probably 7 or 8 times, something like that. But yeah, like I was very fortunate. The first Tarantino movie I ever saw first run in a theater was Kill Bill because I was born in '86, so I was a little too young to watch a lot of his 90s output. But I've been lucky enough that on repertory screenings, like classic screenings, I've been able to see both Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs in the theater, so that's fun because that definitely enhances it. But yeah, I mean, it's a great, again, it harkens back to Eightful Eight. It's a great almost one location thriller. I mean, you get a few other scenes here and there, obviously with the diner, with the flashbacks of Michael Madsen and in Joe's office, you get a few things here and there. But yeah, for the most part, it's kind of confined to this warehouse, and it's all about this conflict. And I think what is cool is you don't really necessarily side with anybody, so you can see kind of everybody's perspective when the shit hits the fan. You've got Tim Roth, who's dying on the ground, who you don't know is the cop until later when they start flashing back to him, kind of practicing his lines and practicing his stories and all that stuff. Initially, Harvey Keitel's got a very level head, but he kind of also has emotion over reason. Steve Buscemi is really the reasonable one who's pretty much right the entire movie and everything he says and how they should handle everything and what's going on. He figures out immediately there's a rat, like he knows that. And then you have Michael Madsen, who it's an unfortunate thing because it's such a great performance that he never matched it in his career. he had other great performances, but I don't think he ever had a role that was as cool or as iconic as Mr. Blonde in Reservoir Dogs. I mean, obviously he's really good in Kill Bill. I like him in like the Free Willy movies and stuff. I think he's good, but like, he's had other good roles, Donnie Brasco, things like that. But he never reached that kind of height, and it's so cool that it's almost like Steve McQueen, Paul Newman level cool in this movie. He's such a good looking dude, and so cool, calm, and collected. He brings a new kind of energy into the movie that's not so manic. They're all screaming and yelling. He's just, you kids shouldn't fight, you're going to make somebody cry. Like, it's just so funny. Every line he has is great. All the minor characters are awesome. Chris Penn, rest in peace, is really fun as Nice Guy Eddie. And I mean, I love the fact that this could also almost be a play like Hateful Eight. You could do this on stage and it would, I think, work just as well. But when it gets violent, it really does. I think it's one of the most accurate portrayals of a stomach gunshot wound, the amount of blood that's coming out, the amount of, every other person in a movie that gets shot, it's like, oh, they're just holding it, just kind of laying there. And that whole sequence in the car, he's kicking, he's throwing his hands around, God damn it, fucking, like, it's kind of over the top, but that's almost like somebody would really kind of act like, I'm fucking damn it, you're gonna be okay, like, just say it with me. And he's writhing the whole movie, he's in pain.
Wow.
So it's that realism. This is the mark of a movie that if you didn't know this was his first movie, you would think this is a movie made by a very experienced filmmaker.
Very true. Yeah.
I mean, you would think this was made by somebody that's already made 5, 10, 15 films already. I mean, it's that professional. So.
It's in a way, in that way, it's kind of like, for me, Ari Aster's Hereditary. Like, it's a lot of these.
Yeah, it feels like
films
you could make this is definitely in that conversation when you talk about best like theatrical debut films for a director. This is easily in that conversation of like the top 5 of all time. I mean, it feels like a movie that he should have made 6 movies in, that he made as his first movie. You can see this being the 6th, Tarantino movie, but it's the first one. But yeah, it's really incredibly well made, incredibly well acted, really good characters, really good dialogue.
If we don't count Edgar Wright's student film, then Shaun of the Dead is also an incredible one. And you mentioned.
Oh, by the way, Kerri, here, this was the steelbook I showed everybody.
Oh, nice.
So it's got a slip cover, so you pull the ear off and Reservoir Dogs.
Oh my God! Stop.
It's pretty great. I like that.
The one thing that you brought up that I also really love is a great trope in films is the cop reveal, the reveal that the character is a cop, because I love when they do it like as a surprise to the audience, but even if you're in on it as the audience and it's a surprise to other characters, I think it's still great. Like in Fast and the Furious with Paul Walker, and he has to reveal. That reveal's really incredible too in that film. But Dylan, what do you think about Reservoir Dogs?
Yeah, I mean, I think I had this at 8. Like, it's lower only because I think this is a great groundwork that he would only build upon further. I think his very next film kind of mastered that non-linear storytelling even more. But I think it's such a great debut, as everyone said. Like, it's a great taste of what's to come. And it's exciting. The performances are exciting. It's just, it only got more exciting for his career to where if I'm going to go back and like rewatch something, I'm going to watch something maybe a little different than this one, but I still like revisiting this one as a good reminder of how it all started. So it's good.
Awesome. And then I think we just have Charles.
Mm-hmm. You're muted, buddy. Yeah.
Sorry, I just realized I was muted. I completely agree with Dylan on this. I feel like Reservoir Dogs is a great movie, but I view it, for me at least, as the beginning of something great. If I had to compare it to like another like kind of relationship between 2 movies, I would compare it to A New Hope and Empire. Reservoir Dogs is pretty amazing. There's no flaws, nothing I can really think of or poke holes in. But it's just done way better in Pulp Fiction, just a movie later. It feels like he's practicing it and he's been able to write like the best first draft out of anyone's final draft. And then he submits that, but he still knows that it's like, it could be a lot better, because I think for me, at like by the time the credits rolled, it was another one where I just felt like he could have gotten a lot more mileage out of a lot of those characters. And I feel like a lot of the characters are just not in it enough for us to grab onto it. And I think that's just because I was so used to going back through all the Tarantino movies. I just got so used to long, epic movies, and seeing something so small and like Reservoir Dogs, just felt like it just kind of paled compared to the others. But I think it's important to still elevate that the ear torture scene is really an amazing textbook definition of show don't tell and the power of imagination. Oftentimes the most violent thing you'll see is something you don't see. And it's perfectly the case here. And I think Tarantino, like, that's something that is probably shown in every film class, of the power of violence, and imagination. And I also think like the use of flashbacks is like great, in this movie. And it's just fun to see him practicing this really early on, and then to see him just like master it even further with other movies like Inglourious Bastards.
Yeah,
It's a great
100%.
movie.
100%. I think like most people would probably agree with you on the take that Pulp Fiction is the sharper version of this one, kind of because they're very similar. But yeah, is there another movie that we can talk about now?
One last point on Reservoir Dogs before we go on. I promise I'll make this quick.
Sure.
It's the best use of something you think you saw, but you didn't actually see since the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Because all these people that saw the movie and go, oh, it's really disgusting when he cuts off the ear. It's really gross. You never see him cut off the actual ear.
Yeah.
It pans away. You hear everything. You hear the screaming. You hear a little bit of the cut. You hear the stuff. And like in the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, when the girl gets put on the meat hook, you never actually see her get put on the meat hook. It kind of does a quick cut to the aftermath, but it's so effective in what it doesn't show and mentally that you see everything, and it's really brilliant. I know Tarantino's a Texas Chainsaw Massacre fan. I think he said he thinks it's the greatest horror movie ever made. So I know he takes inspiration from stuff like that when he was doing it. That your mind can create such a more disgusting thing that you'll ever actually see. And yeah, it's ironic. It's cited as one of his most violent things when later on he literally has people shooting people in the head and exploding. Where you see everything, but people cite this is like his most violent thing, which is kind of ironic.
Well, what is the term for that? It's not like cognitive dissonance, is it? What is the?
I don't know. It's just cognitive trickery. I don't know the actual like term for it, but something like that, where it tricks your brain into thinking you saw something you didn't actually see.
Yeah. What's the next movie we can talk about, Kerri?
So Once Upon a Time was only in 3 people's top 5, so that'd be the next logical
Okay.
movie.
We can talk about Once Upon a Time. I have this one pretty high.
Yes.
Should I start?
Sure.
All right, let's start, and we can just go in order, whatever. This might be the hottest take. I have this number 1.
Whoa,
that is a hot take.
That's a very hot take.
Yeah, that is.
See, I have a different number 1 than a lot of people, but I think people understand my number 1. But we'll get there.
Maybe. Yeah. All right. So the reason I have this at number 1 is because my top 5 are all like number 1. It's like 1A, 1B, 1B. I don't know. I have a hard time ranking Tarantino. We've all said he's a great, great, great filmmaker. He makes not even bad films, but just great films. So they're all like sometimes equally great, and you have to nitpick. And for me, the reason why I put this number 1 is entirely personal. I know most people are not going to put this number 1. It's entirely personal because right before the pandemic, Kerri and I saw this in the theater, and it's one of the greatest theater experiences I've ever had. So I think Kerri might rank this a little bit higher. I'm not sure, but I have it number 1. I rewatched it for this, and I just remember loving every bit of it. Like I love all the characters. I love, Brad Pitt as Cliff Booth. I love him, fighting, I think Bruce Lee. I love everything with Leo being this kind of like has-been who's afraid that his career's about to end and he's not, he's going to be kind of done with. He's got this big house. He hasn't met his neighbors. He sees creepy people walking around. It's just like all the things that Tarantino's like setting up to come together at the very end, I just think is really incredible. And he fooled me. I think he fooled Kerri too. He definitely fooled me into, because we know about this case with Sharon Tate. Kerri knows a lot more about it than I do. But I was like, let's go see this movie about Sharon Tate and, whatever. We were expecting to be really sad at the end and just like disappointed. And then it's like, oh yeah, this is a Quentin Tarantino movie. He doesn't do that. He does the opposite, and he makes you feel good about it. And he says, we all know what happened. Let's watch what should have happened instead. And I think this is probably, in my opinion, his best ending ever. At least it's my favorite. And so for that, alone, I could rank this number one, but I think everything else, like Dylan will probably talk about this, but the one actress from Fablemans, what's her name, Dylan?
Julia Butters, the little girl in
Julia
Once Upon a
Butters.
Time in
She is
Hollywood.
incredible. She should have been nominated for like best supporting actress because she's just so great. She's like already like a mature, like adult actress in this young age. Just all the acting scenes within the movie that Leo's doing when he's doing this Western and stuff with, I believe, Timothy Oliphant. All of that stuff is pretty incredible. Yeah, and then it's just like you get to see like the duality, I guess, like what Charles likes to talk about with, rich Leo in his mansion, and then you get to see his like lowly assistant go home to his like trailer, driving really fast, and you get to see the difference between him driving for work and him driving home just casually. But he's an incredibly insane asshole person. Driving home to his dog, got that dog well trained, all that stuff, and every little bit of this plays in. The flamethrower that he had during his Nazi movie that he made, kind of a callback to Inglourious Bastards a little bit, comes into play. You have the is it Mikey Madison?
Mm-hmm.
Mikey Madison, who we get to later see kind of the same exact thing happen to her in Scream 5. Spoiler if you haven't seen Scream 5. She like gets like totally crazily set on fire. The dog like rips people's faces off, and just a lot of crazy shit happening, like biting the crotch, him just like smashing her face into the wall. Just everything with this is just so great and amazing. I just love this ending so much. It's just like people talk so much, and we'll talk about it. The opening for Inglourious Bastards, one of the best things ever. I think this is one of the best things ever in an ending. And I don't know. I just think everything leads up to it perfectly, unfolds perfectly, and it just works for me. It's one that I enjoy watching maybe the most. Although I enjoy watching like all my top 5 so much. So it's hard to nitpick, but I was like, you know what? Not many people are probably going to have this at number 1, so I'm going to put it at my number 1 because I think it's amazing. Kerri.
Okay, this is my number 4. But like you said, Chad, this is in my top 2 theater experiences of all time. The other one being the first time I saw The Godfather was for its 50th anniversary release.
It's incredible.
In Dolby. And I would say so going into this, I had not seen Inglourious Bastards. I did not know. I knew Inglourious Bastards was about Brad Pitt killing Nazis. That's literally all I knew about. So I didn't know Quentin Tarantino did these revisionist history movies.
Okay, you didn't know. I did. I was just a fool.
So I go in and I'm like, okay, Sharon Tate, oh, this is gonna be sad. And then I think it's when they try to break into Leonardo DiCaprio's house and they start getting attacked by the dog. I was like, oh, this is in a completely different movie than whatever I thought it was gonna be. And I think I had said earlier that the endings for me are kind of what makes some of Quentin Tarantino's movies. And this ending for me is just, it's like, I think one of the most cathartic things ever. And I love seeing like Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt kind of just play in this movie. Like they're just like having a good time, it seems like.
Yeah.
And just the ending scene, the fact that Brad Pitt's character is just completely high. Leonardo DiCaprio is so drunk, and it's just, it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's perfect. And the scene when Brad Pitt makes the guy change his tire, incredible. And maybe Oscar winner Austin Butler is in this. We'll see. James, what do you think about this one?
So I definitely liked Once Upon a Time. I thought it's definitely a really good movie. Like what Kerri just kind of touched upon with like the whole payoff, that seems to be like kind of a theme here with lots of Tarantino's films. And I feel I can get that kind of violence in other movies of his. Like at the end, I was like, okay, this is definitely Tarantino right here. When she's getting her face bashed into that stone mantle and the one chick gets flamethrower to death. Like that's the kind of things I like in a Tarantino film, and not those things individually are what make movies good, but in my opinion, I think I can get kind of violence and payoff from other movies of his. I mean, I loved everyone's performances in this. Leo's awesome as always. Brad Pitt's awesome as always. I might be reaching here, but there was a scene in the movie where they reference Leo's the not ad libs when he throws in the scene where he throws that girl to the ground, and the director comes up to me, oh my god, that was so great. I'm like glad you threw that in the movie like that, like you made it up on the spot. Kind of, I wonder if that was like a callback to when Leo made up the bit in Django Unchained. He breaks his hand on that glass and then rubs it all over Kerri Washington's face. I was like, I wonder if they meant to do that, but maybe I'm reaching. But I just saw that kind of connection there, and I will definitely try to get someone to make a deep fake of Leo in The Escape, because I would watch the movie for sure. I would absolutely watch that movie. But I like kind of seeing that thrown in there too. But I think there's other movies just kind of are a little more satisfying for me as far as like alternate endings go. So this was just down at the bottom of the list.
Dude, when he throws her to the ground and he's like, "You okay?" And she's like, "I'm fine. I've got elbow pads."
Yeah.
That's great. Austin, what do you think about this one?
So I might have it ranked the lowest. I think I have it at the bottom at number 9.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I've watched it 4 times now. I'm trying, I really am, but there's something that just doesn't click with this movie for me. I'm positive on it overall because I think the character work is good. I like the stuff. I like the chemistry between DiCaprio and Brad Pitt, and I like a lot of their individual scenes. It just to me feels like a vignette movie. It feels like a series of like we're going from this vignette to this vignette to this vignette, and I like movies that have a little bit tighter central narrative and a storyline. And I think this movie is severely lacking a central kind of storyline. I mean, there's a thing, the Manson thing, I almost wish he had jumped into the Manson Sharon Tate stuff because I think that would be more interesting. I'd like to see Tarantino's take on that, but really we only get one appearance by Manson. I think they do Margot Robbie kind of dirty in this movie. All the scenes really have nothing to do with anything else. It's like her going to watch her own movie, her dancing around to a record, and like that's it. And then we like never see her again, when I think maybe it's a case of the marketing too. Like I don't know if they didn't know how to market this movie. But it's a hangout movie. I'm not as into hangout movies where people are just kind of floundering around, just going from thing to another. Like I want something to propel, scene to scene to scene. And I think there's a ton of scenes that just don't propel anything forward. And I think we just get to a climax that just is a climax to be a climax. I don't think it's really like pushed forward there. And I'm also just not as fascinated with old Hollywood as a lot of these directors are. I don't care like about like 50s and 60s cinema. Like I'm more of a 70s guy. Like I love 70s cinema and on. I don't love a lot of movies from like 40s, 50s, 60s. Like it's not as my bag. I find a lot of those boring. So like and other directors have gone into that. I just watched Hail Caesar for a Battleground. I wasn't really into it. I've seen like Mank with David Fincher. I'm not as into, The Artist, like all this stuff just doesn't compel me a lot. Like I don't really care about the studio system in the 50s and 60s. Like I just don't give a shit. Like it's just not as interesting to me. So yeah, it's just something that doesn't resonate with me as far as the theme of all this old Hollywood stuff. Again, I like the performances. I dig certain scenes in a vacuum. I dig, like the scene you were talking about where he's doing the Western with Timothy Olyphant. Like it's a really good scene. Like the scene with him and Bruce Lee is a really good scene. And this thing's a really good scene. Like if I watched him on YouTube, I'd really, really enjoy him. But as a 3-hour movie, I don't think there's enough that propels and clicks and connects from scene to scene to scene to scene for me to get super invested. So it's just me. I've watched it 4 times. It's not working for me. And I know I'll go back to it at least once a year to give it another shot. But I don't see it going up too much higher, even in my rewatches. So that's why it's number 9 for me.
Fair enough, bro. Yeah. Charles, what do you think about this one?
Yeah. I had it at my number 7. I just literally got finished watching it like about a half hour, not a half hour, obviously.
All right.
I was on here, but it was about 2 hours ago, where it was right before this. But overall, like my thoughts on it were that the Manson and Tate stuff, actually, it was really interesting to hear you share that was kind of a weak point for you, Austin, because for me, it felt like the strength of the movie here, because it felt like, because Tarantino loves to do alt history, I loved that he just separated Sharon Tate from all of the trauma and all of the stuff with the Mansons. Just kept her completely separate. They didn't even enter the house. They didn't even enter the property. Sharon Tate can just continue living her life like she was supposed to before.
To me, why have her in the
Manson got
movie
in.
then, though? What's the point of her being there?
I think Tarantino is trying to say something special about like what a Hollywood could have been if this one event was just slightly different.
It
Is
goes
a
to
Sharon
the other
Tate
house instead.
Yeah, because Sharon Tate, we get to see her love of movies, someone that becomes like finds her love in movies and loves seeing herself on the screen and loves seeing success. We get to see like a new kind of success where it's more communal. She shares it with her friends, and Leo kind of begrudgingly sometimes shares it with Brad Pitt. I feel like it's two portraits of a different type of Hollywood. We get possibly a more optimistic one with Sharon's that was in reality cut short, and then we get a taste of the classic gruff Hollywood with Leonardo DiCaprio. And so I feel like whereas you felt like it was unnecessary, I felt like it was necessary. And so it was interesting to hear you kind of get that experience from it. Because the stuff with Leo and Brad Pitt is the stuff that I've seen that in other movies. And it's a nice friendship, and they have a nice little arc by the end of the movie. But I really just loved the different direction it took with the Manson and the Sharon Tate stuff. Overall, though, I'm just kind of placing, those are my initial reactions. I would probably have to think about it a little bit more, but I'm still unclear a little bit about what overall message he's trying to craft with this movie. And I love having some kind of a message or some kind of theme. And it's hard for me to decipher what he's trying to say in this movie.
Charles, I mean, I think you laid out some really great things there that is getting me thinking about the movie I put number one. Like, oh my God, this might have more layers than I thought. Or maybe Austin's right and it doesn't. I don't know.
or Sharon Tate is just useless in the movie.
Chad, it's a battleground match for another day. So
hey,
there you go.
Shit. You do the Quentin Tarantino. I'll do another one that we both equally love.
Yeah,
we'll have a rematch at some point.
Right.
JPO, what do you think about this movie?
I have it slightly lower as well. It's my number 7 of 9 here. I definitely see a lot of what Pez is saying here, because to me, I felt like this was just the least. Like, it felt very vignette-y. It very much felt like, we're going from kind of this fun written scene to this kind of like nicely written scene, and I just thought it gelled not as well as the other ones that I thought had more of a cohesive, overarching storyline here. Again, still really good here. I enjoy movies about Hollywood, maybe more recent Hollywood, but like I still really enjoyed what they were saying here. My initial reaction was with Pez about Rabia, so it was like, oh, okay, she really didn't have much to do, so like you almost really could cut her out, and like, because I get the idea of like, oh, I wish it would be nice for her to just to live her life, maybe have her just pop up at the very end of like, hey, what's going on? Because the other scenes just kind of feel like they're just kind of there, which then adds to that runtime of like, this is unlike even Hateful Eight. This is a film where I could maybe see a little bit of trims here and there to make it a little bit of a tighter film. But I still think overall a really interesting flick here, and again something different too, which is kind of good about Tarantino, is that another whole nother kind of era here that he loved and wanted to pay tribute to.
Yeah. I'm actually interested to think about certain things like that. Like, why is Sharon Tate in this movie? Why is that one dude that Marge goes to meet in Fargo in the movie? Like, certain things like that where people think about it and they go, is this a perfect movie? What's the placement of that? I think it's
just a quick fun fact: the Bruce Dern part as the guy in the in the house was supposed to be Burt Reynolds, but he passed away. And he wanted to put Burt Reynolds in the movie because he's a big fan of like 70s Burt Reynolds. Like, he loves all those like 70s movies that he did. Even like Gator and all these like weird movies. He's a big fan and wanted to get him in there and kind of give him one last like big role, but he passed away unfortunately. So he had to go grab his old buddy Bruce Dern. But yeah, I wish we could have seen that, because I think that would have been really really cool for later in the movie.
Yeah, that's FF for fun fact. Dylan, what do you think?
Chad, I'm going to be a bit of a downer to you. That's because right. I know how much you felt like you were so cool to be the only one to put it at number 1. Put it at number 1 as well, Chad. This movie to me is a masterpiece.
This is why we're like best friends.
And the thing is, I totally see all the arguments about the film from various perspectives. Those in the middle on it, those on the bottom on it, those on the top on it. And I agree with all of those I don't agree in terms of like I don't share that opinion, but I agree that those should be, you know, you should always vocalize those thoughts because this is a very different movie. It is more of that vignette movie, but I think I kind of didn't read into the title when I saw the film. It's called Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It's essentially a fairy tale about Hollywood. Once upon a time. To me, it's like opening the storybook on Hollywood, and you get these vignettes. It's like looking through a storybook of this era of Hollywood, and then the whole idea of Once Upon a Time. I should have known from the beginning that this was going to be that fantastical happy ending, this revisionist history ending, because it is a fairy tale. It's not truth. It's all lies. I mean, the scene where Brad Pitt beats up Bruce Lee. Did he actually? No, this is all in Cliff Booth's head. He's reminiscing about that time he beat up Bruce Lee. But we know totally as a viewer that didn't happen. That's him in his brain reminiscing about a fantasy, a false fantasy. I think this movie is all about false fantasies in the fact that, like, in real life, Sharon Tate had a very unfortunate end. And this film, what I think is so powerful about her scenes is we're seeing her just doing her everyday life, going to the movies, going to parties. We're seeing her living her life just normally. But knowing what you know about Sharon Tate in the back of your head, there's a pain and a sadness watching her go about her life, knowing that it's all about to end, knowing that this is like her last few days and it's tragic. So when I'm watching this film, those scenes are affecting me so emotionally because I'm watching it saying, wow, she was just enjoying her life. And why is it fair? It's so unfair that she died at such a young age. And I think those scenes illustrate how, you know, she didn't have really any extraordinary life, but she had a life, and we'll never get to see her live old and enjoy that life. But then at the end, like we've all talked about, you think it's going to go the route of, oh, and now we're going to see her die and we're going to see the Maidsimmers. It's so hard to watch, but then you get that happy ending, and it's kind of, you know, it's the opposite of Inglourious Bastards in the fact that, like, Inglourious Bastards is a revisionist history, kind of like a big mighty triumphant like hoorah revisionist history, whereas this is more just like life just keeps going on, and it's not this big glamorous climactic thing. But I think when you have that historical context in the back of your brain, it makes it feel even more powerful than the Inglourious Bastards one, because it's like, you know, this is someone who, you know, had her life cut short and gets to keep going on. And it kind of plays into that whole idea of the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood being this fairy tale of Hollywood. The fact that it ends with this happy ending where everyone's happy, the music is nice and plain and simple. It's this fairy tale ending, and I think that's just beautiful. I love the vignettes. I love the comedy. It feels like a greatest hits of Tarantino, because you got great action with this stuff with the people who intrude the house. You've got great Western moments with the Spawn Ranch stuff. You've got great comedy. You even got some like nonlinear storytelling where you're going back and forth and flashbacks. And you know, it is very vignette-y. I get that, but also I think that, you know, that's the whole thing. It's a storybook of Hollywood, and you're looking at each person's different life and all these different chapters and ins and outs. And I think the Sharon Tate stuff is always impactful, because every time I watch it, there's that bittersweetness of knowing the truth of what actually happened, but then also a sweetness knowing what happens in this film and knowing that she does get a happy ending, and that there could be an extraordinary sense that something extraordinary can be as simple as something so ordinary, which is just living life. And that's so beautiful to me. I just love this film. I love to chew on it and think about it. That out of time sequence where they're playing Out of Time by the Rolling Stones, and you know, it's kind of flashing forward, and because the movie's setting up for it, they're playing Out of Time. Literally, Sharon Tate is out of time. She's gonna die that night, and you're the audience is like, oh, this is it. This is the last act. Like, oh, out of time. So sad. And then you get this happy ending, and it's so great as a way to kind of like subvert expectations. And yeah, I love it.
Perfect. I love the fact that we kind of unintentionally sandwiched this, where I began with my number one. He ended it with his number one. I came in as like, hell yeah, this movie's great. Oh, I love that end sequence. And then Dylan's like, here's why this is a masterpiece.
You know, I would sound a lot more excited if I had a voice to do it. But
no, yeah, it's great. You talk beautifully. And I love the fact that even though I think Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and Hateful Eight are probably around the same length, to be honest.
Yeah.
You and I were talking about why we love it so much, and we did a brilliant job. And then Austin talked about why he loved his so much and did a brilliant job. You know, this is the beauty of Quentin Tarantino. Kerri, what are we talking about next?
So I think the last one we can, because we've, just to recap, it's been a while. We've mentioned all of our 9 through 5s.
Okay.
The last one I think we could talk about without going up to our 4s is probably Kill Bill, because a majority of us have said Kill Bill.
Absolutely. All right. For Kill Bill, I would like to start with Dylan. I don't think he started yet, so
Yeah.
let's start with Dylan. Kill Bill.
This is right in the middle. This is my number 5. I love this one. I mean, I just think Tarantino's filmography is stacked. So it's like I just think this is one I need to watch more, because it is 2 parts, and it's a whole bloody affair. It takes a while to sit down and watch it, but I just love the genre homages throughout this to samurai cinema, but also just like it's a great feminist piece as well, like kind of like Death Proof. I mean, he's trying to showcase female women power, and I love that. I think Uma Thurman's so good in this role. The action is so good, especially when she takes on all those people all by herself with that single sword. I love the transitions from black and white to color. I just think it's his most stylized movie. I think he just tried the most with style, and I think it works really well. I really don't have much else to say. I think part 2 dives more into like character, more so than action. But I think part 2, the character moments at the end kind of like feel warranted based on the whole journey that we've taken to get there. And I love Robert Carradine as Bill. That whole sequence is so good. So I love this one. There's really nothing I can fault it for. It's just the top 4 I have above it. I've watched many more times. They're just more on my TV on constant replay, but this one's still a banger.
Hell yeah. What is it called? The 5-finger death punch?
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Well, I think we even had an ASAT thing with JPO where he needed the exact wording of the whole thing.
5-point palm exploding heart. Something I don't even remember, but I asked the question.
Yeah. We had to get it exactly on the nose. Yeah.
Speaking of JPO, take it away. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I might actually have this the highest. I have this as my number 3. Which again might also show that depending on how you rewatch this is one of the more recent rewatches just for fun, and it might have even ranked up a little bit higher than before. I love the Vengeance Trail here. I love the different art styles he goes for. Again, kind of like we mentioned before with Hateful Eight and even Django. This is the first sign of him really making kind of a very beautiful movie to a degree here. He's really got some interesting shots going on here that just look gorgeous. Yeah, man. Again here, the eclectic cast. I think Uma Thurman is perfectly casted here. We might shout out Zoe Bell, who did the stunts, who we mentioned before for Death Proof. She's the stunt woman evidently behind it. And yeah, this is the first volume, getting you ready for the second volume here. It's one that it takes its time. Tarantino isn't just about the action here. The dialogue is right there with the action, really making it a two-hander of some of the best action you'll see, as well as just some of the best dialogue here. You get that kind of calm before the storm, but you're in it though. It's not just exposition dialogue drops where you're like, all right, it's the calm before the storm. Like you're enthralled in a different way when that dialogue is hitting. So yeah, I really love Kill Bill, the whole bloody affair.
Hell yeah, man. Charles, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I love Kill Bill too. It's my number 3. And yeah, and so I really love this movie. If I had to separate, if we were talking about them as separate movies, they would be pretty close together as well. I'd probably put Volume 2 a little bit higher than Volume 1. For me, Volume 1, the first half of Kill Bill is the cool kids Kill Bill. Like if you love the fight scenes, you love the anime sequence, it's just a good vibe. Like you put that on if you're just trying to like vibe, drink something, like talk, hang out,
like move your toe.
If you're trying to like cry and like be existential and think about like your future and that everything's meaningless, you put on Volume 2 and it's awesome. And the both of them are such a wonderful pair. I remember the first time I watched Kill Bill Volume 2, I hated the ending of the movie because I just wanted this massive just fight scene. And the fact that the way that it ended just frustrated me. And then when I watched it as an older man, like a few years separated from college, the ending really grabbed me. And it became one of my favorites ever because it really shows that their problem was never about physicality or fighting or violence. Their problem has always been emotional. And so they fight, they resolve the conflict, they fight each other emotionally in that final scene. They goad each other, bait each other, jab at each other. And the fact that it ends the way it does, just disarming one person and then just like bursting the other person's heart, like their pathos, is just beautiful. Tarantino, if you didn't understand that it was about the emotions at that point when his heart explodes, literally, I think it like becomes very clear to the audience what that whole ending is. I think also more directors should have a random anime sequence. Like thinking of Animatrix, like I really wonder sometimes if they took one of those sequences from Animatrix and threw that into the Matrix, if like people would have loved the movie even more. There's just a lot of basically what I'm trying to say is more movies need a random anime sequence. It's great. Just please continue doing it. And I think the last thing I wanted to say about this is I feel like Kill Bill Volume 1 was the closest I had gotten to the Raid style of violence and fight scenes. And like that was like just there's blood everywhere. It's really violent. It's just like you can see like the punches, you can see the strikes clearly. There's not a lot of cutting. And so for me, I'm just thankful because that movie, Kill Bill, was just such a huge gateway movie for me. And it really opened up me to like actually enjoying more violent movies that are more artistic. So yeah, Kill Bill. Love the movie.
That's beautiful. I love hearing those thoughts because I don't know if I would have thought about those in that specific way. And now I can. Thank you, Charles. And also, it's not anime, but Deathly Hallows Part 2 has Part 1 has a pretty great
so good
animation sequence. Austin, what are your thoughts on Kill Bill?
Yeah, it's smashed right in the middle at number 5 for me. But literally my 5 through 1 are all like 5-star movies. It just depends on how many times I've watched them. So that's literally how I have to rank them. But yeah, it gets better every time I do watch it because every time I do, it's like you watch Kill Bill Volume 1, it's like I immediately have to put on Kill Bill Volume 2. It's like watching Empire. It's like watching Empire and you immediately have to put on Return of the Jedi. Like you just kind of have to. And yeah, you have to finish out the story. But I think each one just has their own individual style almost. They're almost like two different movies. Yeah, the first one is definitely a little more action heavy, on the violence, and yeah, the second one really digs into those backstories and kind of getting it later after you've already kind of introduced everybody. It's like, no, let's go back and kind of explore Pai Mei and kind of explore, all this other stuff in the second one and not even really get to Bill really till the second movie and explore and keep that kind of a mystery. But yeah, he resurrects a lot of really cool actresses. I think David Carradine is brilliant in this movie. I like his whole monologue. It's so Tarantino, but his whole monologue about Superman is amazing and it's fantastic. You're literally hooked on every word he's saying. I'm a big Sonny Chiba fan, as Tarantino is. So the fact that he got to work with Sonny Chiba, as Hattori Hanzo is awesome, and you can tell he was even early on because in True Romance, Christian Slater at the beginning of the movie is at a Sonny Chiba marathon. So like it's kind of full circle that 10 years later he gets to actually work with him. And you even have guys like, if you're a fan of certain Japanese things like Kenji Oba, who's the kind of Hattori Hanzo's assistant, is a Super Sentai actor from all these like Super Sentai shows that went on to be like the Power Ranger shows here.
That's cool.
Like, in America, like all these Super Sentai properties that became like VR Troopers and Power Rangers and all this kind of stuff. Like he's a main guy in all those. So you can tell Tarantino's like a fan of all those things and putting those guys in there for anybody who wants to see it. But yeah, it's just fun. Like from the very beginning, I think it's just total dynamite, starting with, her literally dying and like being in this coma and kind of doing this revenge thing. I love spaghetti Westerns. So he throws in, especially the score is very spaghetti Western heavy with the whistles, and it feels like an Ennio Morricone score. When you actually listen to it, it's very influenced in that. But yeah, he brings in sort of the samurai elements as well too. So, it hits a lot of those buttons that has really clicked with me later in life, becoming a bigger Western fan, especially spaghetti Westerns, which I love more than like traditional John Wayne Westerns. And like, we'll talk about it more. Like I love like the Clint Eastwood Westerns. I love like the original Django. Like we'll talk about that. Like I love those grittier, like more violent spaghetti Westerns of the 60s and 70s, like the blood spatter kind of stuff. The revenge stuff is much better for me. But yeah, all the background stuff is just super fun. And the character work, like I said, it just gets better and better every time I watch it. So, I'm always tempted to put it higher. I've just have seen the other ones way more. But yeah, I really dig Kill Bill. It's a lot of fun.
Perfect. James, what are your thoughts?
So I had Kill Bill at number 6, and there's honestly not much that I can really add to what people have already said. I mean, yeah, it's a great revenge story. I mean, Volume 1, you get so much just over-the-top action, which I appreciate in the movie, like, every time. And then, of course, Volume 2 is more like the payoff end of it was, I mean, just as good. I think if we were to separate them, I might put Volume 1 a little bit higher, just again, I like his style of action, and it's like all in Volume 1 for the most part. So, but I think as far as like the rest of the stuff goes, I put a little bit lower. There's just stuff I like watching more.
Absolutely. Yeah. Kerri, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I have this at number 7. Actually, I had this the lowest ranked, but I think it's just a kind of a personal preference thing. I'm also realizing that my bottom 3 are all the only ones I've only seen once, and I think probably if I rewatched everything, who knows what my ranking would be. It's just really difficult to rank these at all. But it's both of these I think are amazing films, and just the action is top notch. They're beautifully shot, wonderfully acted. I don't have much more to add.
Yeah, I also had this in the middle at number 6, but I also really love this movie. I do think I have seen this less than the others, but I remember like watching this like back in the Netflix like DVD days. Like I actually got this on DVD from Netflix, and I remember watching it for the first time that way. And yeah, I thought it was pretty incredible. I think I'd seen parts before that, like some parts, and I remember being very scared of it when I was a little bit younger because there's certain things where it's like you're anticipating a gunshot. I just get so anxious. And the whole part where, when he shoots her point blank or whatever at the very beginning, I'm like waiting for that. So that part just really scares the shit out of me. So like I remember not really wanting to watch it that much, but then I want to finally watch it. Like, yeah, the action in these movies are just really incredible. All the samurai stuff. It's just like when she just goes in that iconic like yellow suit, slashing people around. It's just so badass. Like, this like awesome like woman. Like one of my favorite shows of all time is Buffy. I love to see her slay a bunch of shit all over the place. So yeah, Kill Bill's kind of right up my alley in that way, I think. Charles, I think, really hit it on the nail on the head there when he was talking about like the deeper messaging and stuff later in the second part and stuff like that is pretty great. Like I remember actually kind of tearing up about like her and her daughter, and I was like, this is actually kind of beautiful. It's not just all the fighting and stuff like that, even though all that stuff is really incredible and iconic. The whistling with the assassin who dresses like the nurse and walking down the hallway, just like the stylistic of all the editing of all that stuff, and just everything in this is iconic. The sequence between her and Vivica A. Fox, I think, is just so great. The stuff where they're fighting, and then the daughter comes home, and they have to like act like they weren't fighting, and stuff like that. And then as soon as she kills her, and then the daughter's standing there, and she's got to be like, "I know you're gonna want revenge later," and stuff like that.
There's your hook for Kill Bill Volume 3.
Yeah, there you go. I can't wait. That'd be great if he did that as his 10th, 11th film, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I guess 10th official, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. And the other part that I really love is I love movies like Buried and stuff like that. I like the whole she has to dig her way out of the grave. I just think that's pretty incredible sequence, and she actually does it, which I'm not even sure if that's possible, but she did it.
Mythbusters did it. It said it was plausible.
It's improbable.
It would be way more impossible with an actual coffin as opposed to a pine box coffin. If they really wanted her to be stuck, they would have used a real coffin, and it would be pretty damn impossible. But they actually proved they had a machine that was doing the one punch thing, and eventually they got out. Just your only problem is how long before you suffocate. So
exactly.
Yeah. Yes.
I think that sequence is pretty incredible. Just like so many things in this movie. That we could just talk about this movie all day because it is really incredible. And it's at 6 just because he's a fucking great filmmaker. Anyways, all right.
One last little two-part thing. If they ever do a 4K, please give us the whole bloody affair as one long movie. I would love to see that. The whole cut that I know Tarantino wants. He's shown it in theaters, so there's a cut of the movie. He's shown it at the New Bev, so there is a cut that exists on film of the whole bloody affair. So I'd love to see it. And two, I fancy myself an impressionist. Does anybody want to hear my Michael Madsen from this?
Yes,
please.
Okay. It's the 3 lines he does that is. I think it's in one of the trailers. That girl deserves her revenge.
Nice.
And we deserve to die. But then again, so does she.
That's
Nice.
so good, dude. Yes. All right. I think we should get on to our fours.
Yes, yeah.
And 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. JPO, I believe.
Aye.
4, please.
Django Unchained.
Punt.
4.
If we're doing that. Yeah.
My 4 is Django Unchained.
Going backwards.
My 4 is Django Unchained as well.
All right, Dylan, 4.
Well, if it helps, my 4 is also Django Unchained.
Wow.
All right, I don't have my 4. Hold on. My 4, I know, Pulp Fiction. I know. I'm
You're
sorry.
not the first one to
Kerri.
say it. My 4, we already talked about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
James, 4.
Mine we talked about was Reservoir Dogs.
Austin, 4.
My 4 is Jackie Brown.
All right. Okay. Anything we can talk about now?
I think actually most of us have now said Jackie Brown, so we can go ahead and talk about Jackie Brown.
I think we should start with you for Jackie Brown.
And someone else might also have, because I think we've yet to hear from 3 of us about Jackie Brown, but this is my number 1.
Wow.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Yeah. This is my favorite Quentin Tarantino movie. I wouldn't say it's like, I think all of his films are just technically brilliant films. This really just does come down to personal preference. And I think it's, although this movie definitely has dark moments and dark themes, it is one of his lighter movies. Ultimately, Jackie Brown gets the upper hand and has, I think, as happy of an ending as she can have in this situation. I just enjoy this movie the most. I enjoy putting it on the most. The music is phenomenal. The acting, I'm like, Pam Grier is just so incredible in this role. I'll never get over it. It's just one of my favorite acting performances. And then not to mention, like, Robert Forster is fantastic in this movie. The plot to me is just so exciting, like, to see Jackie Brown like navigate all of these situations. He starts off, she's with the police and she's so nervous, and you see her, when she's pulling off like the kind of the final heist, she's so nervous kind of in private, and then in public she's just playing it completely cool. And I love that we see all sides of that for her. But yeah, I this is just a personal preference thing, that it's just my number 1.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we don't mind, I'm just going to go second real quick because I have to sit number 2.
Wow.
So I wanted to. Yeah, Kerri and I watched this for debate. I debated Henry, and I had Pam Grier as like a top Quentin Tarantino.
I gave you my point for that. I thought you made a better argument. So I actually gave, and he had Christoph Waltz versus Pam Grier. I thought he had a hell of an argument, though. So yeah, he might have had the correct answer, but you had a better fucking argument. So,
Thank you so much, because I knew that I was going up against greatness there in Christoph Waltz, and I was like, you know what? Christoph Waltz is like the obvious answer, but Pam Grier, I think, is the most underrated one. So I think you can really build her up. Make people go like, wait, Pam Grier is actually phenomenal in that movie. And when Kerri and I watched it for debate, I think it was your first time watching it, right?
Yeah.
I think it was like my second time. And then we were both like looking at each other like, is this Quentin Tarantino's best movie? And we were like, no, but yes. Kind of. I don't know. Quentin Tarantino is confusing. He makes so many great movies that they're all the best.
Yeah.
Anyways, Jackie Brown is fantastic. just because I think it's just unlike any other film that he's ever made. It is kind of like that homage to blaxploitation, but it's like giving Pam Grier like a resurgence in her career, and I just think she gives that full performance. I think Kerri really sold that. We're saying that like, you know, she has to play those two parts. She has to be really cool, calm and collected when she's going up against Sam Jackson, who's an evil dude, scary guy. And then he comes in to her apartment, and you know he's the scary guy. You think she's going to be victimized, and nope, she's like motherfucker and stuff like that. And you're like, Pam Grier, god damn, that's crazy. And then she has like the love story with Robert Forster that's so beautiful, just talking about her troubles and like why she would get into this kind of like criminal life that she's kind of in over her head a little bit with that. And then you have you know, when she's with the cops, she does put up like another exterior because she's trying to be strong. But then, you know, in certain parts, you see when she's actually in danger, she is very scared. And you can see that underneath all of that, she's very scared. And it's just so many layers with her character. But not just Pam Grier. Pam Grier is fantastic. I think she's the reason why this is so great. Charles and Kerri and I were just having a game night. We're all talking about across 110th Street and how much of a banger that is. Just starting. See, you can't not sing it, right, Austin?
Yeah, no, it's great.
It's such a great needle drop. Just having it open so stylistically with her coming home from her job. You know, she's got something in her bag, and you know she's just like on the little moving walkway thing, and it's just, you know, the song plays and it's just amazing. Doesn't it also play at the end? Yeah. Yes. And I love that. I love how it's like a book, and you know it begins and ends. And then like, you know, the love story I love so much between them, like I already mentioned. But Robert Forster, so incredible. I love him obviously from Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. But you know, in this movie, I was just like, wow, Robert Forster's freaking amazing. Like he's such a small part in those shows. And in this movie, I think he's so incredible. Sam Jackson, he's a bastard, but he's great. I love how they make Robert De Niro kind of play against type because he's kind of a fucking idiot in this. And I'm like, Robert De Niro, he can play like just a giant idiot. I didn't even realize that was possible. And he does it so well. And you even get Chris Tucker appearance. I'm a big Rush Hour fan. You know, yeah, this movie I think is so incredible just because, you know, you have those tense sequences like the criminal element with like, you know, people doing drugs, and then, you know, the whole briefcase stuff, and there's a lot of tension, but it's just, I don't know, there's romance. It's just like, it feels like his most like full movie kind of like in a way. I don't know. It's hard to describe, but that's kind of how I feel. I kind of really love this movie. And it's tied for my number one with a bunch of other movies. So, but I put it number 2. Who wants to go next?
Why don't I go next? Because I had a lowest, and I don't have a lot to say about it. This was my lowest spot only because it's the only one I haven't rewatched. So like I felt like the other ones I've just seen more, I could like digest more. It has nothing to do with the quality. I love the movie. It's just I need to watch it again to put it higher. But I agree with what you guys said, and you guys putting it that high like makes me want to watch it again. But I remember loving Pam Grier and especially Robert Forster in this. I love how it's like how you talk about him being a nerd, like. We've talked about him exploring different genres, but now he's kind of exploring his favorite movie stars of his childhood and upbringing. Like he loved Robert Forster, Pam Grier, and Robert De Niro, and to see him now work with them, that's just really cool for a filmmaker on his third film to be able to like get names that he respects and looked up to, and to kind of like you said, bring back their careers. Some of them, not Robert De Niro, but like bringing back Pam Grier and Robert Forster's careers essentially. But I just have to watch it again. That's the reason I put it low. But I did want to say I do like it, even though it's lower on my list. But it's a great film.
Yeah, and that actually reminds me a little bit, Dylan, because Pam Grier was Foxy Brown back in the blaxploitation days. Like, I feel like I haven't seen Foxy Brown, but I feel like she was a very like one-dimensional, just kind of like motherfucker kind of character, and we get that from Pam Grier in this. She is Foxy Brown sometimes as Jackie Brown, but then she gets that depth too, and I think that's what makes it so fantastic. Who else wants to go?
I guess I'll go. I'll start with my Robert Forster. My name's Max Cherry. I'll be your bail bondsman. What are you going to see? Something good. It starts soon.
Love it.
So yeah, I'm also a huge fan of Robert Forster. I'm not trying to be like that guy who's like, oh, I saw this band before they were famous, at some club. But like, I'm a huge Alligator fan. There's a movie called Alligator from 1980.
That is a really good movie.
Movie. And I had seen this before I ever started Jackie Brown, and because I love animal attack movies. And Robert Forster is the main character of Alligator. He's this like cop, and Tarantino is also a fan of Alligator, hence why Robert Forster is in his movie. And he's talked about how in some alternate universe, his cop character in Alligator moved to California and just became a bail bondsman. So like he kind of considers them almost the same character in this little universe he puts in. But yeah, I love Robert Forster. He's one of the main reasons I come back and watch this movie so much. I love that he's the main character, and he has such a focus, and he's so lovable. Like, he's just such a pure-hearted guy. He just wants to do the right thing, and his really his romance. You don't expect the romance with Pam Grier to even have a romance, and they do, but it feels natural. It doesn't feel forced. The kind of connection that they have. They're both a little older, a little wiser, than they used to be, and they have, kind of past they're not too proud of. But that thing, the development is so good. I think it's one of Sam Jackson's more underrated performances as Ordell. I just think he's really, he's so cool and calm and collected, but kind of vicious at the same time. He has this side that doesn't come out a lot, but he definitely does. Like you said, Robert De Niro playing totally against type, almost this really shy guy who doesn't almost talk a lot at all. He maybe only has 30, 40 lines of dialogue in the whole movie. He's usually just reacting. So it's interesting just to see him like on a couch reacting to Sam Jackson, doing a lot of reactionary acting. And yeah, he's kind of a dunce, when he asks him what happened. I shot her. Yeah, she ran up to me and I shot her. Just like, what, you couldn't just smack her around? Yeah, I shot her. Just like he's kind of a dunce. But yeah, the dynamic of, and what I like to call is the triangle of deception that Pam Grier is pulling in this movie, because she's playing Michael Keaton and the cop. She's kind of playing Ordell, but she's kind of playing Max Cherry. You don't know who she's going to side with or who she's going to kind of roll with at the end. That's the one thing that kind of sneaks up on you as well, is how well he weaves this thing of deception, and kind of you don't know where it's going to go and how she's going to play it and how she's going to get out of the situation. And it's more and more fascinating for me each time, the way he kind of pulls this puzzle together subtly. So yeah, it's really, really good. I just, again, it's another movie where I just like hanging out with these characters. I think there's a lot of fun. And here's your fun fact of the day for Jackie Brown. The reason that Chris Tucker and Tiny Lister, who's Max Cherry's assistant, that big motherfucker Winston, is he back there somewhere? Yeah. The reason why they're in the movie is because Tarantino's favorite film of 1995 was Friday. That was his number one.
Hell yeah.
He's a huge fan of Friday. So his next movie, he found spots for Chris Tucker and Tiny Lister to be in the movie.
That's an extremely fun fact. If only Ice Cube had been in the movie.
Yeah, I think he tried to. He just didn't have enough roles, literally, to put Ice Cube in the movie. Like he didn't have. It's a very limited cast. So I don't know where Ice Cube would slide into the movie. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's just a limited thing. But
yeah. And I wanted to do a quick shout out of the Delphonics. Great music there.
Yeah, great music.
So you talked a lot about great stuff about Robert De Niro, and I remember Charles was talking about great Robert De Niro stuff the other night. So Charles, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I can go next. So I had Jackie Brown at number 2. I was thinking about putting it number 1, but I put another movie there, just because I just revisited my number 1 and it still held up and just was even better for me to watch. But Jackie Brown, I think, is Tarantino's most serious movie and his most empathetic movie. I feel like one negative aspect of Tarantino's approach to movies is he's so concerned about capturing really unique characters that sometimes the really unique characters end up kind of overwhelming the minor characters, and sometimes it results in kind of an inequity of voices. You get like 3 people's voices predominantly through a movie, and then the other ones are kind of background. Like, I think of Hateful Eight, for instance. Hateful Eight, where you have 3 or 4 major characters of those 8 where like they predominantly take over that movie, and then the remaining 4 are really interesting you want to know more about them, but overall are just relatively minor and are there to die or kill other people.
Please don't get Austin started up again.
Oh, yes, okay. But in this movie, I feel like you spend a lot of time with each individual character, and you really get to see everything from their perspective. And it's one of the rare Tarantino movies where you do get to see the movie completely from each individual character's perspective. I think another thing that really like kind of pops out to me is I think it tells a really fascinating story about aging in a violent world. I think it's Quentin Tarantino's version of No Country for Old Men, where it's like two people that it's the middle of their careers and they're at like kind of a bridge. Do they continue going down this path or do they decide to make a different decision? And everybody's kind of at that path in their life. Even Robert De Niro's character, he just got out of prison for finishing what he thought was his dream heist. And now he's trying to figure out what to do next. Everybody's at kind of a decision point in the movie. And I think it tells a really beautiful message about how you can still be powerful. You can still have agency no matter what age you are, no matter whether your beauty or strength is faded. I think also this is kind of a precursor to hate to bring up television, but Better Call Saul. I think that this is a huge precursor to Better Call Saul. If you think about Tarantino, the word quiet probably doesn't come to mind. But in this movie, there are a ton of just very quiet moments where you're just sitting with the character as they're just slowly, like, think of Jackie Brown and just quietly like reorganizing her bag a couple times each time. Think about the quiet when he convinces Chris Tucker to get into the trunk and Samuel Jackson's just putting on the gloves and you see his face switching. There's so many moments with each character where it's just quiet. They're making some kind of decision. They're processing. They're important character moments that other things would later on master. But I think of a point that Kerri brought up earlier that I think is my favorite moment in the movie, where you cut to Jackie Brown and she's practicing taking out the gun, and she's just trying to. She's just rehearsing, just practicing it, and it's leading you to believe that this is going to end in like a bloody shootout. She's going to kill him. But no, like she uses that moment to process and realize that like this isn't the path I want for myself. I have agency. I have choice in this matter. I'm not going to take part in this. I'm just going to call the cop and he's going to do it. And I think that's just such a wonderful thing that we get by just simply having that kind of scene in it. It shows that Jackie Brown is a hero and a relatively pure one at that. She doesn't want to get her own hands dirty. And I think that's really good. So Jackie Brown, I love this movie. I think if I watched it again, I could see it easily jumping up to number one for me.
I think you actually solidified something in my head that I didn't know how to explain before. But I think another reason why I love this, and I think it's his most unique, is because if you look at every single other Tarantino film, there's something over the top, and I just don't think you get that in Jackie Brown at all. And I just think, not that that's bad, because that's one reason why we love Tarantino, but that we don't get that in this movie is just really cool because it's just something different from him. So I think that's great. James, JPO, who wants to go next?
You tell us.
I'll go. I had Jackie Brown at 5. I definitely like this movie a lot. I think a lot of great points have been made by such an awesome film. Like I was a little surprised at the whole kind of romance part of this. Like that caught me for a loop, and I definitely liked like what Quentin Tarantino did with that. I think for me though, it seemed not that Quentin Tarantino does like lazy or slow with his movies sometimes, but I think this one kind of just kind of chugged along a little bit at parts, and I understand like Charles's where you're kind of like with the characters, but I think in my opinion it's not quite what I really look for in the movies that much. But I think to have it be like a slower film to still have the kind of payoff in the ending it did, it's definitely still a really good movie. Number 5 though, it's right in.
Hell yeah, JPO.
Yeah, so I had this maybe one of the lower people at number 8 here, but it's still one that I really do enjoy. It's one I do need to rewatch. as well as one of the probably lesser seen ones as far as repeated wise. Again, just kind of reiterate what everyone has said here. Kudos to him for again using kind of the outside the box actors here. Again, more shout out to Forrester. Pam Grier is so awesome here. I was an instant fan of her after seeing this and go more into a deep dive on her later on. She's still really fun whenever she pops up in TV shows and movies. Even if someone like Sid Haig popping up as the judge, I love the people he cast in movies here, whether it's a scene or two or for a leading role here. So, and maybe because it is in a weird way, maybe that's why it is a little bit lower. Maybe because it is the least fantastical of his films. Maybe that's why I'm just more enthralled and enamored by the other ones to a degree. But I do got love for Jackie Brown as well.
Perfect. All right, Kerri, are we going threes now?
Yeah.
All right, and three. Are we to Charles now?
I think we're actually to Dylan now.
My 3 is Pulp Fiction.
Interesting. All right, and does that go back up to me now?
Mhm.
Okay, my number 3, Django Unchained. Kerri.
My number 3 is also Pulp Fiction.
James.
I put Inglourious Bastards at 3.
Austin.
My number 3 is Pulp Fiction.
Carlos.
My number 3 was Kill Bill.
JPO.
I also had Kill Bill.
All right.
All right.
Anything to talk about now?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can go ahead and talk about everything else. I think starting with Pulp Fiction, that's been the most said so far.
Yeah.
Of the 3 that are left.
Yeah, one of his freaking masterpieces that I think everyone unanimously loves this one. We're there at this one that I think is unanimous, like I said.
And I think James and JPO have it in their top 2, if I'm not mistaken.
All right, yeah, let's start out with James and then go JPO.
All right, so Pulp Fiction, I put this in number 2. I mean, this will be one of his best movies, I think, of all time, really. It's just one more I kind of liked a little bit, but this one, it's just so fantastic in so many ways. I love the differing storylines. It's definitely like a puzzle box comedy blend. I thought all the roles are done just so well. I love the casting. I love all the actresses in this. It starts off with some diner heist, some random things, kind of just goes on. This is one that I watched when I was older. I know Ted said he was born in the 80s, kind of his a little bit of perspective as what the kind of movies he likes. I was born in the 90s, so these movies definitely were. I did not watch these for the longest time, and I watched Inglourious Bastards in the theater. I watched I think I watched Kill Bill, obviously DVD. I was a little bit younger, but I wasn't really looking for some of these. But when I saw Pulp Fiction, that one stood out to me. It's probably definitely one of his best movies of all time. Had to put something else number 1, but there's so much about this to love. I will probably always love Pulp Fiction.
Amazing. JPO.
Yeah, this is my number 1, man. This is a hard list to rank. Again, I very much too could flip flop a little bit here in a month from now. But I think constantly though when I just think to my number 1, this pops into my mind. You say Tarantino. This is what I envisioned first here from the iconic DVD VHS cover of Uma laying down. This is just it's that first one where even more than Reservoir Dogs, now you are in an even grander scope. You're jumping around with so many great characters here. You're popping into Bruce Willis's life here in a little bit here. You mentioned the diner scene. That's some of the best tension when Jackson's just talking to Tim Roth at the very end and trying to keep things calm because he's got a new vision of his life here. It's super funny. It's especially the first time you don't know where it's necessarily going. Poor Marvin in the back seat from everything that's going on to the delicious scenes between Travolta and Thurman here that just still hold up here, man. Every time I see it, I'm back in it, and this is just one it's definitely one I can go back to. It really just I think opened up the world, and I think Reservoir Dogs put him in the conversation, and this put him on. Put him on the map as maybe an all-timer, and then everything else is really sinking in. So Pulp Fiction is currently my number 1.
Absolutely. I'll go next real quick. Everything about this film, Pulp Fiction, it's iconic. It introduced kind of I don't know if it was the very first one, but it popularized the whole non-linear storytelling where certain scenes happen in different sequences, and you're like, oh, this is like really interesting. Like, I don't think it's as interesting of a movie if you just did everything in a linear take. You have so many great scenes of just like dialogue. That's iconic, with them going to interrogate or whatever these low life criminal, like not low level criminals, into giving them money, and like you're trying to fuck Marcellus Wallace, or is Marcellus Wallace a bitch, stuff like that. There's so many iconic lines. Just Travolta and Sam Jackson talking about the Royale with cheese, and he got thrown out of a window for massaging her feet. Just all this stuff. Everything is memorable, iconic. Every character has their moments. Bruce Willis is incredible in this, and he's just kind of like doing he's not John McClane. He's like doing a more softer kind of version of this. He barely talks sometimes. Like, he's just sitting there. The camera's focused on him while he's listening to Marcellus talk. There's so many great framing that Tarantino does in this. Even when it's like him changing in the taxi, talking to the driver, and you see in the background, like it's kind of a low budget style, like none of that looks real behind him, but you don't care. It's like not. It's just so stylistic. It's like a pulpy film. Maybe you called it Pulp Fiction. And then, it's just Marvin getting shot in the face. Everything that happens with the whole pawn shop sequence, and the shit that happens in that basement. And then Bruce Willis coming up and like going to different weapons. Like, no, not that one. No, not that one. This one. Kind of a deal. Just so incredible. Like I said, so quotable, iconic. I don't know. This one, I think, is the one I kind of expected most people to put number one, and I don't really see, because I feel like you have like two different phases of Quentin Tarantino. You have Reservoir to, I don't really know where that stops, but then once you get to like Inglourious Bastards, it's like a shift in how he makes movies, and it's just really interesting that I think this may be the best one of that ilk, or maybe Jackie Brown, because they're so different. So I don't know, but I think this one's incredible, iconic. I love it to death. I love watching this one so much. I think it has like a perfect screenplay. So it's just, I don't know, it's incredible. Career resurgence for John Travolta. Uma Thurman's fantastic in it. Kerri, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. In this movie, like, there's a reason, we're talking to it close to the end. It's absolutely incredible. There's quieter moments in this movie, like the moment in the hotel room, the scene in the hotel room between, Bruce Willis and his wife.
Fabian.
Yeah. But there's no boring moments in this movie. Like, this movie is like from scene to scene to scene, like something is happening, the story is building, like and I don't know, I just love the structure of this movie. It's so brilliant how everything winds up kind of interacting between each other, but each is its own individual story as well, and I think each individual story is brilliant.
Yeah, like the importance of a wristwatch and everything that ensues with that. Let's go diagonal to Dylan.
I had this number 3. This actually, when I first, like a month ago or something, when you were putting together this video, I was like, all right, number 1, Pulp Fiction, and I kept going down. And I think it's because it's like more of like the universally like accepted, like that is his big breakout. That's like the movie he's known for, put him on the map and all that stuff. But the more I thought about it, I was like, personally, I just think I am more passionate about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is my number 1, and then my number 2, which I haven't mentioned yet. So this came in at number 3, even though I think it is a perfect film mostly. I think there's one element that sometimes detracts me, and that's
correct.
I think it's a perfect screenplay and it's plotting, and a lot of it's banter, but the stuff that Tarantino writes for his character, his own character in the film, I think it's aged a little poorly, but I also think there's so many other great parts about that film that rise above that one scene or one moment. And I think Quentin Tarantino not being like the nicest guy, kind of, if it, it doesn't hurt. If it was a nicer director saying those words, I'd be like, oh man, but it's kind of like, well, yeah, Tarantino, he's kind of a dick. But I do still love everything about the plotting of this movie, the way the non-linear storytelling is, all the performances. I think it's exceptional. It's a great movie in a great year. I mean, that year, 1994, stacked, and that is one of the great films of it. It's kind of like one of the most important indie films in how it like kind of changed the scene and like Charles said, like kind of made cinema cool in terms of like the types of movies that were being more popularized in like the mid 90s. I think Quentin Tarantino, this is like his big breakout for a reason. I think it's great.
Yeah, and it did not win our very first episode of Picture This 1994, but it came so close. 3 movies came so close, and one actually won, Shawshank. But Pulp Fiction came very close. They're all like really kind of tied.
Yeah, they all tied.
We both adore that movie. But you hit on something interesting that we haven't really talked about. Honestly, I think Quentin Tarantino is a great example of when a director just probably shouldn't put himself in his own films, because I think he's normally the weakest parts. I think he's kind of fun in Pulp Fiction, except for when he does start dropping certain words that he probably just shouldn't have. I think also when we get to Django, I think is one of the worst parts of that as well.
I think if you had put, because I know Steve Buscemi's in the movie as
go ahead and with your thoughts.
Okay. Well, I was just gonna say, I know he's in the movie as the waiter, as a quick little cameo. I think his little manic energy would have worked better for the Tarantino part in that scene. If you put him in that scene, because he could be like on edge, like, well, you guys fucking found a dead body in here, goddammit, you can imagine that, right? And be like, what the fuck am I gonna do?
Yeah.
Like, my wife gets home, like, you can picture him in that scene. If you
like, that guy from the restaurant.
Yeah, that guy, yeah, like, or just something like that. Like, have somebody else be the waiter. Who gives a shit? Like, just I just mean like if you put him in that role, even if it's a quick like 5-minute role, I think it would have worked. But anyways, like. My little fun fact for this one, does anybody know if you played the movie chronologically, what would be the final scene of the movie? As far as the events of the movie, because I know the answer to this.
Is it him getting shot on the toilet or no?
No.
I can't remember. I looked it up. I've read it before, but I can't remember what it is.
Oh, no, Marcellus?
No.
I can't remember what it is.
The final shot of the movie, if you played it chronologically, would be Bruce Willis and Fabian leaving on the motorcycle.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Zed's dead, baby. Zed's dead.
I'd like to watch this chronologically to see if it works.
So if you did that, that would be the final scene of the movie, chronologically.
Oh, can you do I'm pretty fucking far from okay? You got that?
Well, the whole, I don't want to say any bad words for that one, but yeah, you hear me, hillbilly boy? Your last moments ain't gonna be pretty. You will not enjoy this. I'm gonna call me a couple of pipe hitting, to go get medieval on ass with a pair of pliers and a blowtorch.
Hell yeah!
No, he's the best. No, yeah. I mean, what's there to say? What's there to say about Pulp Fiction? Yes, it's my number 3, but it's just because we're ranking our favorites, not necessarily. Yeah. If we were to do like, what's the number 1 Tarantino movie? Yeah, the one. If you ask any person off the street, 9 times out of 10, name a Tarantino movie, Pulp Fiction is going to be the answer. Period. Yes. It's the one that everybody associates with him. So I totally get that. Literally, it's number 3 just because my top 2 I've just watched more and I love, just connect to me personally. But yeah, I mean, Pulp Fiction is Pulp Fiction. It works. I think it would still work chronologically. If you probably played it chronologically, it would still work. Like, I'd love to see it, but I think there are cuts online where you can probably watch that. But yeah, like it's one of the most fascinating things when I first saw it. I blind bought it, much like I blind bought Reservoir Dogs, just because I was starting to really get into movies. And I think I watched it 3 times that week, just like digging into everything, listening to commentaries, watching behind the scenes. Just it became enraptured, and it's one of those movies where I watched it, and then all I wanted to do was talk about Pulp Fiction to other people. Like it's one of those things where, oh, I saw this movie. Can we talk about it? People are like, yeah, I saw that movie like 10 years ago. What are you talking about? Like, why would I want to talk about it with you? But yeah, it's what's there to say? Great performances, amazing screenplay. Probably his most quotable movie. overall, like you'd be hard pressed to find a Tarantino fan that couldn't damn near quote something from every scene in this movie, or something. And again, just yeah, the definition of cool. Just everything is cool in this film, and shocking, and just so much fun, and the twists and turns it takes. Like the pawn shop thing just comes out of nowhere. They just stumble in this pawn shop, and all of a sudden there's a gimp and a dude who wants to rape, Ving Rhames, and like you're like, what the fuck? Like, where did this come from? Oh my god! Only in the Tarantino universe. But yeah, but it's amazing. And seeing them kind of come together. It's one of my favorite things in the movie when Bruce Willis saves him, and then he's just like, "Are we cool?" He's like, "Yeah, we cool, but you cool." But you have lost your LA privileges. You leave tonight, right now. It's great. So much fun. I dig the movie more and more every time I watch it. I just have my 1 and 2 for sheer number of times I've watched my number 2, just higher. Yeah.
Yeah, legitimately, I think if it didn't have the things that Dylan was talking about, I think it's a perfect film.
Yeah.
It is the one that people put, like, I think cool young dudes put on their wall, the poster, like that in Fight Club. Charles, go ahead.
Yeah, Pulp Fiction's great. I feel bad because I have it at my number 6, but there's a lot of positives about this movie. I love short story cycles in books. I feel like it's often harder to see it like done really well in movies, but I think it's done just perfectly here. I think it's just wonderful to see the characters like show up in each other's stories for brief moments. It really feels like the world's more interconnected there. And I just love the impact of seeing John Travolta's character shot on the toilet, and then like see him like 15 minutes later
in the diner with Sam Jackson. He's alive again. Well, you see him walk in the bar, and they're wearing the goofy shirt and the shorts.
Yeah.
And you don't know why the hell they're not wearing their suits from the opening scene. You're like, what are they wearing that for? Is that what they wear when they're not on duty? Like, that's weird.
Yeah. he does such a great job of building intrigue for the different like reveals as time goes on, and so it's a perfect short story cycle. I think this is probably his strongest soundtrack as well, out of all the movies. There's just so many iconic songs and moments. And this was definitely another gateway movie for me. This and Kill Bill were gateway movies for me, not just for Tarantino, but getting me to care about movies and treat them as more of an art form instead of something to eat or something to watch while I'm eating popcorn. I think the biggest flaw, and I think Dylan, you talked about it too. Well, there's like 2 things. I think Quentin Tarantino is one of the directors that shouldn't really act. He just doesn't. He can't. I feel bad. He cannot act. But like there are other directors that are
you
great.
don't like his Australian accent that we'll talk about in Django?
No, oh my gosh, it's bad.
Let me tell you something, black fella.
David Lynch is a great example of a director that knows how to act, but also knows his limits. You don't see David Lynch going and being like, okay, I'm going to play a character that's in my bathrobes. I'm waiting for my wife to come home, and I'm going to be saying all of these racial expletives. David Lynch is just like, no, I'm the guy that can't hear. I'm just yelling everything because that's what my job is on set, is I'm yelling really loudly at people to do things. So David Lynch knows his limits.
Think the cool thing too about that is David Lynch just knows how to make his movies just weird anyways, so that when he does that, it's okay.
And Scorsese is someone that should have acted a lot more in his movies. His scene in Taxi Driver is one of the best.
And he's in Quiz Show too, and he's really good.
He's great in Quiz Show too. I've gotten us off topic, but I wanted to make sure I agreed there because he's not good in this. But I think the other thing that doesn't age as well is I think this is the one movie that I don't think he does a great job of writing women in. And that might feel nitpicky, or that might feel like a hot take, but I feel like this is the only movie where the women are treated only as foils for the men. Uma Thurman's character, you think has an arc, but she doesn't really have an arc. She's there for John Travolta's arc and his character growth and his realization as like how power normally resides and how it's perceived. And Uma Thurman's more of a foil for his character. Same thing with Bruce Willis. We barely see his partner. She's mostly a foil to show like how rough and exterior and hard Bruce Willis' character is when he's around his wife. That kind of crumbles. The women are just kind of foils in general. They don't really have any kind of arc growth. There's no character, or I guess Uma Thurman is the most fully realized, but even in that, she doesn't really have an arc. She's just there to OD and then eventually get saved by John Travolta. And so I think I would have loved to see, since Pulp Fiction had so much room for these various like men, I would have loved to see just maybe a better written woman. I think that would have been fine. But I mean, I think he made up for it with his next few movies. So I think it's more of a blemish rather than like a trend.
That's actually a brilliant point to look at, like a movie that most people will be like, that's a perfect movie. There's no flaws in it. And Charles is like, wait, what about the women characters?
There's no such thing as a perfect movie. There's perfect movies in our mind, but every movie in history can be nitpicked to death. I'm sorry.
Alien's perfect, but yeah, I agree.
See, I would say Aliens is perfect, but I know there's flaws in that movie, I'm sure, somewhere.
Movie Battleground to come when I get Charles to join.
It's the most perfect movie ever made. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
All right. We rounded that one out. What's next?
There's two more to talk about, right? There's only two more.
We can go ahead, I think, and talk
You have
about
everything
the last
down?
two. I don't have everything down, but
Let's talk about okay, which one do you think we should talk about next?
Well, how about, do we go around the horn and all say our number ones, and maybe whoever has the most number ones, we talk about that as the number one, and whoever's the least amount number one.
I like that idea. You start, Austin.
My number one is Django. Django Unchained.
All right, Charles.
My number one is Inglourious Bastards.
Pulp Fiction.
Dylan.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Mine was Jackie Brown.
James.
Django Unchained.
Okay.
So that's two for Django and one for Inglourious Bastards, right? So
yeah.
Let's talk Django.
Wait. Should we talk Inglourious Bastards first?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, because there's more number ones for Django.
There's more number ones for Django, yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Only one person has Inglourious as number one. So, yeah, I know we didn't really technically say our number two, but we're already kind of around that. So, yeah.
All right.
So everybody could just remind what Inglourious, just say what number it was on yours, and we'll talk about Inglourious.
Absolutely. All right. Inglourious, Charles said he had it number one. Let's start with him.
Yeah.
Sure. So I think this is Quentin Tarantino's masterpiece, and I would not be surprised if he does not make a movie as good as this again. It has everything for everyone. That it's a thriller, it's a political thriller in moments, it's a historical epic in others, it's even a French new wave film at a certain point within a theater. Then it's also a war movie, and then there's also a romantic side plot or side plots in this movie too. There's just so much covered. It feels like his first attempt at like writing just like a classic novel, because everybody feels extremely fleshed out. Everybody has a purpose. Everybody has like an ultimate fate that makes sense for them. And when I think of great endings, this is the movie that always comes to mind. I think it's a perfect ending. I think in general, this movie has a lot to say about the power of storytelling and how it's not always a positive thing. You see Hitler and Goebbels using stories to basically suppress others and cause a genocide. You see the bastards are using it to scare, manipulate, save some people, but also dominate others. Like they get lengthy introductions, all of them. And it's like very stylized. And you hear Hitler talking about the stories being spread amongst the country. Shoshana uses it to avenge and free others. Like, I love her edit of the film at the end of the movie. It's just so perfect. And then Hans Gruber, or not Hans Gruber.
Another good Hans villain. Two good Hans villains in cinema. Yes.
I know. Hans uses stories to just simply survive and thrive. If you notice, all of his confrontations always starts with a little story he tells. And that story tells you everything you need to know about how he's going to go about this situation. And so it's a really beautiful and tragic movie about how storytelling can be used to hurt and help people. I think Operation Kino is probably the best part of the movie, although I have a ton of favorite parts in this movie. But I think Operation Kino, that entire sequence, should be studied in classes. I think the briefing scene and the basement bar scene are some of the best scenes ever made. The briefing scene is great because you have Mike Myers playing someone very out of type, but doing such a beautiful job of doing it. It's a great setting or set piece to set up like the action to come. It tells you everything you need to know about all of the characters. It tells you everything you need to know about the place, the purpose behind the characters, what you need to be careful of. It tells you that he's really knowledgeable about film, less knowledgeable about the language and the culture of German, which will come into play later. And that basement bar sequence is so good. You spend so much time in it. It's like the lengthiest part of the movie. And it's amazing to see it constantly go from tense to not tense, from dramatic back to tense again, to emotional to tragic. And it just hits all of those different pieces. And so in general, I feel like if someone is struggling to write a good scene, they should just rewatch the basement bar sequence over and over and over again, because that is, I think, the best scene ever made. It's got everything you need from a movie. And so for me, I could talk for hours about Inglourious Bastards. It's hard for me to think of one problem with it, but it's somehow feels extremely serious and impactful, and it somehow also feels like a power fantasy. And I think that's really, really hard to do. And I think this, along with Django, is Tarantino truly like going for a massive risk, something that could be a career ender if he doesn't do it well, and he nails it.
Yeah, I also agree. I think that bar scene is my favorite as well. I love it so much. And also because you had the Hans Gruber flub, that just goes to show that Hans Gruber is the most iconic Hans. It's the one that you think about. You know, Hans Landa is second. JPO, Inglourious Bastards.
Yeah, I love Inglourious Bastards. It's my number 2. Charles said a lot of good things here, man. I think one of the best opening sequences in all of movies here. Sets up the guy that you hate. Again, has the tension here. It's two people talking for the most part. But just like I just want the best, and even more so than like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood for me, man. Like I really kind of dug, because it's the first time that he kind of re-envisioned history. Even the ending, you're like, oh shit, okay. Like it's a real surprise when he does what he does here. But I mean, obviously, you know, look at what it was. You're all for it. You're like, oh yeah. Everyone that's in this, man, like this is one of those cuts. Like I don't know. I wish there was a 9-hour cut. You know, this was a mini series, because you know some people do get kind of lost in the shuffle here. You mentioned the great bar scene with the fingers. You know, I heard him talk about that recently, about like, you know, that is kind of the first time you meet a lot of those characters and as kind of being fleshed out. But he enjoyed writing it so much, and you can see it here. You can see how it just kind of poured out of him. It's another tremendous scene here that goes on for quite a while here. The hidden cameos here, Mike Myers, it's always a fun one. Yeah, this is one that I definitely in my top 3 to 5 always. Really enjoyed going back to it.
Amazing. Dylan next, and also talk about the stuff with your dad.
What's up with my dad?
The dinner stuff with your dad, like the.
Oh yeah. So whenever we have dessert at Thanksgiving or Christmas, my dad will always do the wait for the cream for everyone, and he'll hide the whipped cream until we all have like our pie or cake or whatever, and then he'll be like, wait for the cream. And then he'll go in the dinner and go get it. He doesn't say it in the language, but he says it in English. But
Mr. Randazzo, a class act, and also one of the stars of Quiz Show.
Yes, he was in Quiz Show, which lost Best Picture to didn't lose Best Picture to Pulp Fiction, but was nominated for Best Picture alongside Pulp Fiction. Lost to Forrest Gump. Inglourious Bastards is amazing. You all have touched on the best parts of it. Chad and I discussed it in depth on Picture This, and it won our Picture This prize. One of 2 films for Tarantino that won our Best Picture prize. The other one we're about to talk about after. But Inglourious Bastards, yeah, it's amazing. It's a perfect movie. It's a movie I didn't love the first time I saw it. I was like, oh, that's really good, but some parts are slow. I don't know if the whole like rewriting history, like I was confused by it, and then I realized I was a high schooler, didn't know much, and then I grew up, and now it's like one of my favorite films. I love it. My top 2 are both revisionist history movies. This was my number 2, so I'm like, I just think I love that angle of Tarantino's films the best, like just kind of using storytelling to like write new truths and use, you know, because it is storytelling. It doesn't have to necessarily be by the books, biopic making. That's not his goal in film, and I love that. I think it's incredibly stylized. Christoph Waltz, maybe the best supporting performance of all time, maybe next to only Heath Ledger in The Joker or J.K. Simmons in Whiplash. Like, I can't think of many other performances that won that Oscar that are more deserving than this. So excellent performance, excellent movie. I love it.
Absolutely. I think we're going up to me here. So I won't be too long. Like all my thoughts are on that picture of this episode pretty much. I love this movie. I think my only nitpick is a very, very personal one. I have a thing with sounds that I have a very big problem with, and I covered this on our show as well. So like during that scene where, he's waiting for the cream, they do the sounds. It's so aggravating because you hear all the clinking and you hear all of the eating, and it's just so sloppy. And I'm just like, it's probably there to make you feel unsettled and uncomfortable, but for me it's like amplified. So sometimes I don't like watching that scene even though I think it's brilliant. That's my like only nitpick. I think that this film is perfect. Charles said everything I think perfectly. Just my favorite scenes are the bar scene. I love them playing the game. I love Michael Fassbender having to do this kind of like impersonate a German, and then the one guy comes over and he's like, "Yeah, I agree. Actually, your accent sounds off." And then he has to kind of go, and kind of scramble to prove that he is who he says he is. There's just a lot of really great stuff with that. And, everything with Hans Landa, he is one of the greatest performances of all time. Christoph Waltz is incredible. I was going to ask when Austin talked, have you ever had Sam Levine on your show?
I wish. We haven't been able to get him yet. I know we've reached out to him. He just doesn't respond a whole lot on Twitter. Yeah. But yeah, we've tried. We've had other people. We've had Hal Rudnick. We've had some other people that have kind of dabbled in different things.
Yeah.
But we've never been able to get Sam. I would love to have Sam Levine on. Yeah,
that would be cool. From Freaks and Geeks, Sam's great guy, Schmodown fame. And you have like little parts like that. Sam Levine, BJ Novak that just like pop up, and they don't really have like arcs or anything incredible to do, but they're like key parts to the Bastards. Like it's just badass, like made up of a lot of like Jewish people and stuff like that going around getting vengeance on the Nazis. And I think Brad Pitt is just so iconic in this movie. I just love the way he talks. It's so weird, but it's like kind of like an over-the-top version of that guy, I think, in the the military or whatever, like a band of soldiers like this, the leader, and I want my scalps and stuff like that. I'm not as good as Austin, but I try.
Every one of my regiment owes me 100 Nazi scalps. Now my scalps.
And then obviously probably the funniest part of the whole movie is when he's like, it's like, what? I'm like the first best Italian or whatever. It's like, buongiorno.
Arrivederci.
Arrivederci.
I speak a lot of languages. Italian ain't one of them.
So you just have like great funny parts like that. I think Shoshana is just a brilliant character. I love her whole plan for revenge. I think is so brilliant. Her owning the theater and them questioning, like, how'd you get that theater? And just everything with the theater, I think, is so brilliant. The iconic imagery of, I think she's wearing like a red dress, and I don't know, just so visually appealing. I love how he doesn't do what some other films like the Last Duel and stuff like that, where it's like this takes place somewhere else, but everyone's speaking English. Okay, and this has the actual guts to be like, no. You're going to read the subtitles because this takes place in Germany.
The biggest center of that is the Tom Cruise film Valkyrie.
Yeah.
Where they're all German soldiers, but everybody just speaks English with no accents whatsoever. That's
right.
One of the biggest sins of that is Valkyrie.
And I think that's why this one's like really true. It really like pulls you into that world. And that's why a lot of those scenes are so tense. All the ones with Hans Landa, the opening, the one that I said annoys me sometimes. It's all pretty perfect. Christoph Waltz, I love how he's that, smarmy, like charming guy, but he's evil as all hell. His whole explanation about, Jews are kind of like, rodents that come into your house. And it's like, they're not like bad, but it's like, you wouldn't think twice. You just stomp on it. Like that's just the way things work. And that's just such a perfect way to explain how certain people would view someone as inferior, like another human being. And it's just a perfect like World War II film for that. You know, I could keep going on and on. But yeah, kind of a perfect film. I love it. Do you want to go next?
Yeah. This I think mostly everything has been said about this. It's my number 5, but really just because personally I prefer a little bit the films in my top 4 a little more, but it's an incredible movie. Like the acting is just off the chain in this movie, especially I think from like Christoph Waltz and Melanie Laurent. And yeah, I don't have much more to add. I feel like everything's been said at this point.
No worries. Yeah. But James, you haven't talked, right?
Right.
James and me. Yeah, James go first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Austin, go ahead.
No, go ahead, James. Yeah, James go
All right,
first.
I'll go. Yeah.
Oh,
I'll go.
James hasn't gone. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So this one, like I mentioned earlier, was the first one that I was able to see in theaters, mostly because I was like of appropriate probably age to see it in the theaters at the time. I didn't really look for Death Proof in the mid 2000s. I had to watch Kills on DVD, but this was one I could like go to, and I didn't realize he could do such like a great job on like an alternate history piece. And like you guys have said, like the scene, like the tension is just like palpable in the scene. Like when Hollander, he speaks in French as much as he can, and he switches to English, but he does it because he knows the Jews he's looking for don't understand English. So when that hits, that's like the tipping point of like, oh shit, it's about to go down. Like this is what he was trying to do the whole time. Kind of same thing in that basement scene we've all talked about when Michael Fassbender orders the beers and does this, he's supposed to do this. Like I appreciated kind of know it was explained in the movie, but like kind of having that bit of information before going into that movie. So when I saw him do this, I was like, oh, this is the point where they're all completely screwed. This is how, this unravels, and them having to kind of stick to their stories. But you could tell that he was like about speaking to that German officer because the officer in that basement like knew immediately, like, all right, something's off with these guys, and I'm going to find out what it is. And all I had to do was like press them a bit more. It's just that kind of that tension just really, really did it for me. This is such a great movie. I love seeing Hitler get mag dumped in the face by MP40, so that was pretty satisfying. Just to see something different like that was great. I think this one being the first like full theater experience really kind of set it apart, and I think I was able to appreciate the more like alternate history films he did before this. And I went to view, like, of course, the stuff from the 90s is amazing. It's incredible. I always will love Pulp Fiction. I'll keep it number 2 forever. But this one probably put him on the map for me the most just because it was that time of life when I was going to go see his movies more so. And I was still in my history major at the time at UMBC. So I was appreciating a good history piece, even if Hitler gets mag dumped by an MP40 in the end of it. I appreciated seeing that. So this is definitely 3.
Yeah, incredible. Honestly, I think Pulp Fiction and Glorious Bastards are probably 1 and 2 in most people's like not necessarily personal, but like the best films or whatever. But yeah, Austin, go ahead.
So my 2 fun facts for this movie will be the fact that the Eli Roth Bear Jew part originally was supposed to be Adam Sandler.
What?
I wished it was.
Yes,
Oh
and
God.
I actually think that works better because you know if you notice in that scene they do this very slow reveal of who the Bear Jew is. You get that you were talking about sound design, the sound design of the bat clicking against the stone and kind of dragging, and like you hear all that first, but then when you get this big reveal, it's just Eli Roth, and it's like I knew who Eli Roth was because I'm a horror fan, but like nobody else knows who the fuck Eli Roth is. But like if you do that slow reveal and it's Adam Sandler in a wife beater and these suspenders, like you're like what? And especially if he had like, and for the role he was gonna like do push-ups and get kind of jacked up and be kind of muscular, and you'd be like, holy shit, like Adam Sandler's gonna beat the shit out of this guy with a bat, like that'd be fun. Like and he wanted, because he likes to use unconventional people in some of these roles, and I think that would be so much fun if you do that slow reveal and it's Adam Sandler. That'd be like, oh wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, I would have loved that.
Would he have talked like Little Nicky?
Yeah, I'm gonna hit you with this bat now. Oh, yeah.
We know too that
Yubi
Adam
Halloween voice.
Yeah.
We do know that Adam Sandler can act now. He's proven it
We
many
know he
times
can.
before.
We
so
knew it at the time because he had already done
Yeah.
Punch Drunk Love, so it's not like he
Yeah.
hadn't done dramatic roles.
I love Punch Drunk Love.
So, and I think it was
Me too,
literally just
PTA.
it was a scheduling issue. I think he had to drop out last minute, but I know they had the discussions. It was going to be Adam Sandler. And my other thing was the Mike Myers part where he's playing that general is a tribute to his dad. And the whole thing is that a tribute to Mike Myers' real dad, who showed him when he was a kid he loved old war movies. And his favorite scenes, oddly enough, I always thought Mike Myers always thought it was weird, but his favorite scenes were always just where the generals would be standing around a table with the pokers, going like, we're here, the people are here, And he said he always wanted to play that a role like that as a tribute to his dad, so literally the role he has when you go back and watch it is the British general who's literally in the movie he's like, our boys are here, the Germans are over here, and it was a complete tribute to his dad. So that's where that comes from, and that's how he plays it. So and his dad was actually British, so he's able to he's mimicking his own dad basically in that scene.
Is someone in his family Scottish?
His dad, I think his mom was. I think his mom was Scottish. His dad was British, something like that. Because I think he was born in England, actually, something like that. And I think he grew up in Canada, but like they moved to Canada eventually. But yeah, something like that. But anyways, yeah, I have it at number 7. Excuse me, I might have the lowest of the group, I guess. To me, there's a stretch in the middle for about an hour where I kind of check out for a while. I'm not as interested, including the bar scene. I think the bar scene goes on too long. I think the bar scene at 37 minutes is way too long for how long it takes to get to the finish we get to. I think there's incredible moments. I just think it takes way too long to get there. I think that scene could be 20 minutes and still get everything it accomplishes out of the way and still build that tension. I'm just kind of waiting for the tension to kind of eventually get there for me. And really it's kind of starting with the Mike Myers scene through like a scene or two after that till we get to the theater. And then for me, it kind of picks up again, but there's a good chunk in the middle where I kind of check out. And that's why it's not as rewatchable for me. I think the opening is dynamite. I think the stuff with Brad Pitt at the beginning is dynamite. Like a lot of that stuff is great. And then it picks up again at the end with the theater. But yeah, I mean, other than that, like I don't have a ton of nitpicks. The only other kind of nitpick thing I don't like about the movie is the way Shoshana is treated and how she goes out. I don't like a behind the scenes thing that Tarantino actually choked her in the scene with his own hands is really disturbing to me. It's like, bro, acting's there for a reason. Me and JPO know we're from the wrestling world. We can choke somebody and make it look like a real choke without actually choking somebody. It's called acting. We can do that. You don't need to actually choke a woman. I think that's kind of disturbing the way he sort of treated some of his
Diane
actors.
Kruger's character?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Diane Kruger, right? That was Tan.
Or whoever it was. Like I get them confused. I get Shoshana and Von Hammer.
That's an intense scene, though. I think that scene is incredible.
Yeah, and I just don't like the way she goes out and doesn't get to have the final kind of blow against Daniel Bruhl. I don't like the fact that she dies before Daniel Bruhl dies. To me, is a little backwards. I think I don't mind her getting injured in the process, and it could be a fatal injury, but I think she should be able to kill Daniel Bruhl, overcome that, then maybe flip the projector on, have her projector be the kind of fuck you to everybody in the theater. That's fine as she's dead. I just don't like the way that plays out to me. I think if you switch that, and it switches a lot of problems for me. So I just don't like the way that character is ended. And like for that, just to me, the middle part has a lot of kind of stuff that drags for me. So it just doesn't make it as rewatchable for me. But I mean, it's a great movie. I'm not saying it's not. It's excellent. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we're at our final movie.
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna go around like normal. I'm gonna start, and then we'll go all the way to Dylan, and he can round us out. Especially since we covered this movie also on Picture This, and I think we probably all love it here. I think Django's just pretty damn incredible. I'm not a huge Western fan, but for some reason this one works for me really, really well. I love like pretty much every part in it. I love like the opening with how Django gets rescued by Christoph Waltz. That whole thing is incredible. I just think how that's set up with the slave owners and him coming out, and then like as soon as like he does what he does to them and everything's like logical with them, he's like doing everything by the book, the straight and narrow. I gave you a chance to do this. Even if I fuck you up, I'll pay you. Stuff like that. And it's just like, things that he could do. I don't know. It's just pretty excellent. And then when he finally frees the slaves, he's like, you guys have a choice to make here, and then they end up, I think, like fucking them up or killing them or whatever. And then, yeah, he goes with Django, and then they just like learn about each other. He learns about his Broomhilda, and he's like, wait a second, you're the love of your life is like a black German black slave who speaks German. Her name's Broomhilda. And it's like, I don't know, just it seems a little ridiculous, but then it makes sense because she's like, I think she had like German owners, stuff like that. And then when they get to the that one town, and then it totally flips when he gets there and he's acting like, he kills the sheriff or whatever, and then or the mayor or whoever he kills. And then he flips it, and you think, oh, this guy's done for, and he's like, no, actually, this was all legal. This was my right to do, and you actually owe me money now. I just think like every scene like that is pretty incredible. Just the dialogue between character building between them. One of my favorite fucking things about this movie is Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah.
I know everybody loves Christoph Waltz as like the best villain that Quentin Tarantino has ever done. My favorite is still what's his name?
Calvin Candy.
Calvin Candy.
That's still my favorite. I'm bad with names, but I still love him. Calvin Candy. Like, I just love the story about Leo, so as he should be. Hesitant to say the N word so many times, yet when he dives into the character, as we know Leo to be, the story about James Cameron saying, when he's like this like cocky little kid, just kind of like grumbling about playing Jack Dawson. As soon as he turns into Jack Dawson. It's like we hear the story so many times about Leo and how professional he is, how perfect he is. He could just switch into that character, and a lot of the great actors can do that. That's Leo. It was Calvin Candy. He's one of the most ruthless motherfuckers ever. He crushes this role. We already talked about he ad-libs a thing, hurting himself, and just keep the scene going. Just crazy professional, and just like one of the most like ruthless, crazy son of a bitches like of all time in film. And I just love watching him work, even though I'm disgusted at everything that he does, like the dog stuff, like the dogs tearing the slave apart. That shit really gets to me. I'm like, oh my God, like I can't, it's hard to watch sometimes, which is the power of the movie. But then you get so many like joyous parts too that are just like so incredible. You get like Django finally like whipping these slave owners who whipped Broomhilda and so many other people, probably to death at some parts. And then he, kills them, whips the one guy. I don't know. It's just incredible imagery to see a free former slave beating slave owners. Incredible. The end sequence, over the top shit, like the one lady getting shot, her flying across the room. It makes no sense, but it's incredible. It's Quentin Tarantino to a T. Like, he's just that guy. One of my favorite comedic sequences of all time is the KKK people arguing about the hoods. And it's like, I can't see out of this damn thing.
I think we can all agree the hoods were a good idea.
We're glad that she made this for us.
Yeah.
And Jonah Hill's in it. I know, it's just like a very, very funny scene, making the KKK look exactly like what they are. Fucking idiot, white, evil clowns, exactly. Just stupid motherfuckers that just like are evil and just want to terrorize people because they look different. And that's exactly what they're portrayed as. Perfect. Quentin Tarantino nailed this movie. It's just a perfect movie. It's just such a great movie, Western. I love Jamie Foxx in it most of all. He's just fantastic. I could keep going on and on, but I'm not going to. Kerri, on to you.
Yeah, this is my number 2. everything you said, Chad. This movie is just absolutely brilliant.
I think this is my number 3, by the way.
Whatever you said.
I'll look it up.
It's your number 3. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, Jamie Foxx and Christoph Waltz in this movie, I think are just absolutely phenomenal. And I think their relationship in this movie is really fantastic. And I love Kerri Washington as well, and her relationship with Jamie Foxx in this movie. This movie, I think, is really one of his most impactful, just because, you know, we do get kind of Jamie Foxx as the hero at a time when, you know, slavery was prominent in this country. And I don't know, just the violence in this movie, I think, hits different than any other Quentin Tarantino movie, because even though this movie is fictional, like some of these violent acts, you know, are stand-ins for real violence that happened. And it's hard to, like Chad said, the scene with the dogs is, I think, one of the hardest scenes ever to watch. And not just because of the violence you see on screen. I think it's because you're thinking in the back of your mind, like, you know, this probably has happened to someone at some point. So I don't know. This is one that I think is, you know, parts of it can be difficult to watch, but parts of it are, like Chad said, so joyous, and it makes it worth it. I don't know. It's, for me, it's just one of the most impactful movies that Quentin Tarantino has made.
Absolutely. And I forgot to mention Sam Jackson playing like the big like Uncle Tom character. And I love how it inspired a great Kendrick Lamar lyric where he's like, no better than Samuel on the Django. And it's like, that's like that character that like you just despise. Yeah. James, on to you.
Yeah, it was, again, my number 1 Tarantino film. It will probably always be that way forever. I mean, the performances were amazing, as in most of his movies, but this one, like, everything was just so great. I agree with Chad. Leo stole the show big time. I love Christoph Waltz. He's amazing in this one. Everyone just does such a good job. I know we've talked about Tarantino's films just looking good, and this is just a gorgeous movie. Like the set pieces, the props, the costumes, just everything is on point to a T. I love seeing all the slave owners get with them into them. When they're trying to find the 2 brothers on that one plantation, the one guy comes out with like the Bible pages like stapled to his shirt, just like that level of just insanity and that kind of mindset. Everything about this is amazing. I think this one was number 1 just because I guess I like seeing the slave owners get what's coming to them a little more than I like seeing Hitler get shot in the face, but that's just a personal thing. I know these are going to be personal reasons why we like these, but I know I usually plug rewatchable movies in my list in these in our rings, and if there's 3 Tarantino films, it's Django Unchained, Pulp Fiction, and Inglourious Bastards. I can watch them pretty much any time. Talking about Django makes me like, right now, after I'm done with this, I'm probably going to go find it and turn it on because I just love the movie so much. And I rewatch it for this because I know I didn't need to, but talking about it, I'm probably going to go watch it after.
You have to.
Yeah, I'm probably going to have to do that. It's my favorite Tarantino all the time. I love pretty much everything about it. That's what I got, though.
Totally 100% agree. Austin, on to you.
Yeah, I said it before. This and Hateful Eight, either one could be number 1 on any given day. This week, it's number 1, so it just is. And this is my other one where I've watched this movie, again, I'm not exaggerating, probably 75 times. Like, I put this on a lot just to, again, listen to the dialogue and how much it clicks. I think it's one of the fastest-paced movies he's ever done, even though it's one on the longer side. I don't think there's a slow moment in this whole movie. I think this movie flies by. Every scene is electric and has an energy to it. Every character that enters brings another form of electricity. Your 2 quick fun facts for this one is the guy, if you didn't know, the guy who walks up to Django after the Mandingo fight and asks him his name, and he says, my name's Django, the D is silent. He goes, oh, I know. That's Django Franco Nero. That's the original.
Oh, that's so cool.
So yeah, I'm a huge fan of the original Django. I have this is the new Arrow 4K they put out of the original Django. I have a t-shirt prefer Django. Like I saw Django, the original one, before I saw Django Unchained, and I was a massive fan. It was when I was in my spaghetti western phase. It's a great spaghetti western, by the way. If you've never seen it, it's awesome. Franco Nero is just a hero of Italy. He's like one of Italy's Italian actor heroes. Like he's amazing. He's one of the coolest dudes ever. And yeah, so that's why he says I know, because he's the original Django. And fun fact, he's also in John Wick Chapter 2. He's the guy who runs the Italian version of the place or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
The one they stumble into in Italy. So yeah, and that just fits. Yeah, he's the Italian Continental guy. But yeah, that's him. And then also in the dog sequence, there was originally a deleted sequence that had two other actors, Robert Carradine from Revenge of the Nerds, and he's been in a bunch of things. Was supposed to be in the sequence, and Tom Savini, who was in From Dusk Till Dawn, were both kind of the lead trackers that hunt down the guy who gets chased down by the dogs. But we don't see that sequence, so they're there, kind of like in the background if you look real close. But they're originally supposed to have bigger roles that just got cut out for time. But yeah, speaking of that sequence, that's one of the other brilliant things about this movie is Tarantino sets up this world, again, with these scary sequences where you don't actually see the violence of that dog scene. You just hear it. You hear it, you see people's reactions, you hear it. You don't actually see, you get little flashes of it really quick. You don't need to because it's horrific enough as it is. And even the description that Sam Jackson and Steven gives of the little Quint Dickey mining company that he's going to send Django to near the end of the movie, when they break out of that thing of like, you're going to go there and they're going to hand you a hammer, and they're going to tell get to work. And they're, and if you give them any sass, they cut out your tongue. And you're going to stay there turning big rocks into little rocks till the day you die. Like, that's horrifying. Like, he's right that like that's one of the most horrifying fates you could ever have. It's not necessarily dying or having your nuts cut off or whatever. It's this life that you're going to spend the rest of your life basically until you pass out physically and die at this mining company, just turning big rocks into little rocks. That's a horrifying thing that we never actually see, but the description of it is terrifying. That's one thing that he does, and he does a great balance of mixing those joyous moments, those funny moments. There's a lot of it might be one of his funniest movies. Just in even with Calvin and some of the interactions he has with Steven going back, you gonna let him stay in the big house? You better shut your mouth. Prevent it. They're my guess, like they're back and forth. As bad as those people are, they have funny moments, built within this thing of tension. And Steven might be, Sam Jackson might actually be even more evil than Calvin Candy, because Calvin Candy is a slaver, but Steven sells out his own people, and backs them up. So he might even be more evil than Calvin is. But yeah, I'm a huge spaghetti western fan. And I dig westerns in general, and yeah, this movie is just so much fun and so fast paced and great. And Christoph Waltz, you can make an argument his role in this one's maybe even more fun than Hans Landa. Honestly, I like Dr. King Schultz. I think he's again electric in every scene that he does. The way he's able to outwit people and outsmart people with his words and use his words. Not necessarily he uses a gun when he needs to, but he's able to kind of work his way out with his words and his mastery of the English language. And it's really fascinating. And yeah, who doesn't love the revenge stuff where he just goes back and just kills every motherfucker on that damn plantation? It is amazing. So it's great. He kneecaps Steven before he kills him. Like, it's great. It's so much fun. So I dig this movie. I've seen it so many damn times. So yeah, it's my number one, man. I love this movie to pieces.
Yeah. And I actually kind of agree with you. Like, I think Waltz in Inglourious Bastards is the more iconic, probably the more brilliant part. But I think my favorite of his is him.
Just the one to just watch over and over again. The way, like you said, that way when he's doing that bar sequence at the beginning, get the sheriff, not the marshal, and the way he goes, so actually, you're encouraged to wire him out of Lubbock, Texas, Judge Lettermore, so in actuality, you owe me $200. It's a brilliant scene. I think it's some of Tarantino's best writing, the way he reveals all this stuff and the way the characters develop and just their friendship throughout the whole movie. And again, one of the great what ifs of cinema. What if Will Smith had taken the part instead of Jamie Foxx? I think it would have been interesting.
No.
I think it would have been interesting. I think Jamie Foxx does a great job. I don't know if it would have worked, but it's one of the great sort of what ifs of cinema if Will Smith had taken this role. So
same with like The Matrix and stuff like that.
Will Smith was supposed to be in The Matrix as well as Neo. So again, it's interesing to think about. That's all I'm saying.
We know he's got a good slap, so.
Yeah, no, it's not true.
Moving on to Charles.
Yeah. So for me, I have Django at at my number 4, so it's pretty high for me. I think I agree that like King, I think is a better character than Hans Landa, which is just kind of wild to think about. Because Hans Landa is so good, but King, you don't feel guilty enjoying watching. Hans Landa is absolute, just straight evil, and like it's fun to watch him. But like you, at least for me, I always have in the back of my head, like, man, he is just awful. Um, and so you get to enjoy kind of King, and you get to enjoy Christoph Waltz just chewing the scenery, and you don't have to have the moral weight of like you're watching an evil character too. I think his fate is, I think the first time I watched it was frustrating, but the second time I went back to it, I really love his ultimate fate and Candy's fate in this movie. I love because it's more, it becomes more of a kind of ideology conflict in that case. And I love how King had a line and once that line was crossed, he just stopped giving a fuck about like living or dying. This was something worth standing for, and he viewed Candy as someone worth dying to kill as well. And so I just love that fate. Steven is really, really frustrating as a character to watch, but he's fascinating. Django as well is amazing. Everybody's tragically perfect. I think it's a really ambitious project too. This could have totally ended Tarantino's career. There are a lot of like, if Pulp Fiction was his last movie and he announced that his next movie was going to be this, I don't know if it would have been good if he did this right after Pulp Fiction, because I think Quentin Tarantino was still figuring out at that point how to write from vastly different perspectives other than his own. But because we had Jackie Brown, Kill Bill, Death Proof, and Glorious Bastards, it felt like all of that was preparing him for a movie like Django, where he would have to be comfortable writing outside of his perspective. And I think he really does nail it. I think it has the most hard to watch scenes. I think we've already talked about the dog scene is really rough, but I think in general it's a pretty empathetic direction given to the characters, and I don't think he glorifies the violence unless it's being done to people you hate, and then it just gets really just blood everywhere, people flying. It's great. This is going to sound really nitpicky. We've talked about Django, and it's been mostly positives because it's just an incredible movie. But the editing, I had some trouble with the editing this time around when I rewatched it. And it's hard for me to say that because there's some really powerful scenes and some powerful editing. For instance, how the dog scene is re-edited back into the scene later at really critical moments to like remind characters of the trauma that they had just seen and remind the characters of the line that they were not willing to cross. That's great. But I have a lot of problems with how his flashbacks with painting his relationship with Kerry Washington, with Broomhilda. I have a lot of problems with how that is handled. It's sometimes it just literally it feels like it comes out of nowhere. It's silent during a lot of the flashbacks, and then it just cuts back to them, and they're in a completely different day, in a completely different location. And it just, every single time those scenes pop up, I'm just constantly thrown for a loop. And I become instantly confused about where are we? What time is this from a conversation? It's just him thinking about it while he's sleeping. Why are these scenes here? And that's hard for me to say with a Tarantino movie because normally his editing is so good and there's so many great moments in this movie. But like there were like 3 or 4.
That might have something to do with the fact that Sally Menke passed away in 2010 before the release of Django. And
Really?
Sally Menke was his primary editor that edited all of his films up until Inglourious Basterds. So if Django feels like, and Hateful Eight feels somewhat different than his other movies, it might have something to do with the fact that Sally Menke had passed away at that point, and he had to use a different editor.
Things are linking up to me because the editing just felt off for this one, and I think even though Chad, you mentioned it earlier, the majority of his movies do have great endings. I really don't like the ending to this movie. I honestly think after he is initially captured after the big shootout, the rest of the movie just completely plummets in quality, and it goes from like a 10 out of 10 movie to like an 8 out of 10 or 7 out of 10. Everybody knows the direction the movie is going in. We're just waiting to get there. And that's kind of frustrating because the rest of the movie is so well paced. So maybe it's an editing issue. I don't know, but that was the first moment or the first movie out of all of these where I was actually pulled out of the movie because of the
To me, can I defend it just a tad?
Yeah,
to where
go
it
for
shifts, the way it shifts, and the way I've always felt about it is when you watch the movie, even though it's called Django Unchained, it's kind of the Dr. King Schultz show up until that point, until he passes away, until Calvin passes away, and the fact that from then on it actually becomes the Django show, and to me, it gets to showcase, especially in the scene where he works his way out of the situation in the wagon, heading up to the mine company, and the way he's able to take that the thing in his pocket, the wanted poster, and weave this tale and talk his way out of it, much like King Schultz would talk his way out of situations initially, and sort of be able to think on his feet. To me, it shows what he's learned from his time with Dr. King Schultz and his ingenuity, and not just being able to just shoot his way out of it, which he does later, obviously, but he's in the situation where he has to talk his way out of it, use his mental abilities of what he's acquired over his time with King Schultz, and the way he's able to weave this narrative kind of out of nowhere and able to save himself using his brain, not just his muscle. So to me, I like that, and the fact that he then goes on the shooting spree or whatever that he does, but it becomes the violence show, obviously. But to me, that scene is critical in showing what he's learned throughout the entire movie. Yeah,
you did a great job defending it.
Thank you. I'm in this thing called Movie Battleground. I just want to let you know that I'm really good at debating and convincing people.
Any more thoughts, Charles?
Yeah.
What's up, Chad?
Any more thoughts?
Nothing I can think of for that one. Yeah.
All right. A lot of great points said back and forth. JPO, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, another great one here. I have it at my number 4, but I still think it's right at pretty much a 5-star. I love this top 5 for Tarantino. I absolutely love. This is I had high expectations because Inglourious Basterds was my first theater experience as well. I think I saw Kill Bill in a drive-in actually, but an actual theater experience. It was that. Cool. So I had high expectations. I was like, yeah, follow that up, QT, and he certainly did. Django's great here. You guys already mentioned some of the greatest villains in Candy with Leonardo DiCaprio, and Samuel Jackson's also a dicker. You're so ready to get the comeuppance. You are so ready for him to get his comeuppance. A beautiful tale. It's a great twofer of the other great Christopher Waltz performance here, also coming off of of course Bastards as well here. So he used them again in a beautifully done way. The guys already talked about the cameos here, Jonah Hill and the bag. It's beautiful. It's definitely one of the harder ones to watch here, with some of the things that they task, but it ends in a very glorious, bloody way. And is again just another stellar outing from Quentin Tarantino here, man. I love it. You guys kind of said it perfectly.
Beautiful. And now let us end. I always love hearing him talk movies because he's just brilliant. Dylan, round us out.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to follow, and all of you said everything that's amazing about this movie. I really have nothing else to add. I mean, this is my favorite. Not my favorite. This is my number 4, but this was my first introduction to Tarantino at all. Because I watched this. I think I was when did it come out? 2012. Yeah, so it was 14. So I was in high school. I went with my dad, and my dad was like, "Listen, Tarantino, his stuff is a little gory, a little bloody. Just be ready." I'm like, "That's okay." And I sat and watched it and was mesmerized, blown away by it. And I think it's one of those movies where now that I rewatch it, there are other movies that just stand out more to me. But this one always has that sentimental spot of this is the first of seeing basically my favorite director on screen, and that's a big that kind of overwhelms any negative critiques I have for the film. Is the director himself good in the movie? No. Is his scene kind of bring it down? No. But or yes, it does bring the movie down a little bit, but I don't really care as much because it's I still get that overwhelming sense of joy of seeing it in the theater. And yeah, I love it. It's great.
I just want to say, I do like that he brings in Michael Parks for that Australian scene. He has one of my favorite lines in the movie that I've quoted to other people and they have no idea what I'm talking about. Whenever somebody's lying, I go, now I don't like liars. Just the way he says Lars. It's wonderful. And just one other thing, who doesn't love the opening song, which is from the original 66 Django movie, by the way?
Django.
It sets the scene so
well. And that's from the original movie. If you go watch the original movie, it's the opening of that movie is that song. So he literally just did the song from the original movie. It's great.
Austin, I honestly I can't wait. I want to buy that Arrow thing that you got.
It's great. It's so good. Yeah,
right.
it's just a fun spaghetti western. You'll like it.
Perfect. All right. We've gone pretty long, a little over 3 hours now. I'll see if I can get that down. But Kerri, do we have a final ranking?
Yeah, we have a final ranking.
Ooh.
So we assigned numerical values to everyone's rankings and added them up to
At number 9, Hateful Eight. Fuck you all. Bye.
Well,
we could put it number one.
I'm kidding.
There is not a number 9.
And I think these are pretty clear because we had there's not a number 9. We started number 8 because there's one tie. And, we had one movie that no one had in their top 5, and actually 2 movies, I think, that were in everyone's top 5.
Okay.
I think they're appropriately placed on the list. So at number 8, we have Death Proof. No surprise. It was in no one's top 5. At number 7, Reservoir Dogs. At number 6, The Hateful Eight. Tied for number 5, Kill Bill and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Cool.
At number 4, Jackie Brown. At number 3, Inglourious Bastards. At number 2, Pulp Fiction. And number 1, the movie we just discussed, Django Unchained.
That's a
Nice.
That's a banger of a top 5 and like a near perfect top 3. I don't know. That's just a really great list that we did, and I think a lot of people would probably agree with that thing. And that's the great thing that we did. We had 7 people, right, on here to discuss one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. And I think, all of our things came together, made a fantastic list. So we did it. This was months in the planning. We wanted to do a Quentin Tarantino episode. We had mentioned it a lot of times. I know we were talking about the end of Halloween episode, and JP and Austin were like, we got to be on that. Austin's like, oh, that's my favorite filmmaker. So I'm glad we can have all these great people on to talk about, one of the greatest filmmakers ever.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of other people, I think we filled this up pretty quick. A lot of other people wanted to be on it, unfortunately. I think even with, we had 7 and it took us a little over 3 hours.
Yeah,
so.
I was getting a little bit too like, sure, you can be on the Quentin Tarantino. And then Kerri was like, we have enough people. And I'm like, right, we have enough people.
Yeah.
Anyways, I love the more the merrier, but it takes a while if you have 7 people.
Yeah. I was gonna say someone could have watched Death Proof twice and still not have hit our 3 hours and 10 minutes.
That's okay though, because
I did watch Reservoir Dogs, and I'm almost done with From Dusk Till Dawn.
or you could just watch Hateful Eight once.
But I think this made for a great episode. I'm very excited about it. Let's go ahead and finish this thing off. We did a great job. Love all the movies. Thank you for watching. Check out our other videos. Like and subscribe to the channel, please. Check out our other videos that we did. I don't know. We've done a ton now, actually. Edgar Wright, Harry Potter, Halloween, Scream, Nightmare on Elm Street. Our big Disney animated ranking that we did, that was 61 movies. It took that. This was long. That was 5.5 hours long. That was pretty incredible. Check that one out if you have the time. It was very fun. This was long in the making. I'm glad we can get this one done. We're about to do our Phase 4 MCU soon. I'm very excited about that one. And then we might have some other.
Don't have me on for that one because they're all bad.
I will convey that message, Ted. I will convey that message.
Yeah, right.
We are in talks about other topics, but we'll talk about those. We'll maybe mention those in the Phase 4. Thank you so much, everybody who was on here. This was very fun, and we'll just go close it out. But wait, are you guys ranking with me?
Django.
Yes, we are.
Django.